Chapter 1575. In any case, the Vricuans had already trained these terrifying progenitor dragons as mounts. These draconic knights were the biggest problem for the Allied forces. If they didn't get rid of these guys and charged straight to the Ice Crown Glacier, no one knew what would happen to the Allied forces' supply line. Seeing the swarm of progenitor dragons that looked like a swarm of locusts and dark clouds rising in the sky, almost every Alliance commander revealed a triumphant smile. Let's show these barbarians of the northern region what a trap is. William's ceremony slashed down heavily from the sky. In the sky, Naxxramas didn't even need to open fire. Even the Alliance's airships that were swaying in the air opened all their cannons and fired the 40mm 8-barreled cannons. There were also the new Dongfeng air defense cannons on the ground. In the sky and on the ground, not even 3-style bombs were used. They directly formed a dead zone that could turn the entire airspace into an absolute no-fly zone. It was the black smoke and light projectiles that were pulled out from thousands of air defense cannons at different angles. Amidst the sounds that were denser than the sound of the rain, young Xiaofan only saw the sky full of red progenitor dragons being shot into pieces of smelly flesh and blood. Even their masters who were riding them exploded in the air. They didn't even have the chance to fly away from Utgard Castle before they turned into bloody mud and fell back onto the castle. This was the biggest blow to their morale. The Vricuans' morale was declining at a speed that was almost visible to the naked eye. They were already on the verge of collapse from the bombardment of the heavy cannons before they even engaged in battle. Now, the progenitor dragon legion that they were most proud of had been annihilated. Even the Vricuan infantry that had already begun to charge had begun to slow down. The earth-shattering shouts from 15 minutes ago were now like the futile cries of 2 or 3 kittens. No one knew if it was to hide the fear in their hearts or if they were truly braver than others. William also felt a little bored. He propped his sword on the ground and only said 4 words, "Su Jin, fire." Under the influence of a certain someone, William became a commander of the new era. He had the qualities of a modern military commander on Earth, and he also had powerful combat skills and swordsmanship. He could be said to be the model of a new era leader. Facing the primitive Vricuans, he didn't hold back. He directly used heavy artillery and mortar formations to blow up the Vrykul who dared to rush out. Any infantrymen who managed to escape the bombardment zone or dragon knights who managed to fly out of the no-fly zone were naturally killed by snipers. William gazed at the dilapidated Utgard Castle with a faint smile on his face. Uncle Duque really takes care of Stormwind. Yeah. Brawl Bearmantle of the Iron Triangle also sighed. As the commander-in-chief, Duque's forte was this kind of seeming fairness, but there was no trace of favoritism. Putting the dwarves on the western front meant that the dwarves couldn't be the main force on the eastern front. The small Vrykul raider clan was definitely not worthy of William's full strength. What Duque and William really valued were the eggs of the ancestor dragons. Adult dragons had their own will. They were used to being commanded by the Vrykul, so it was impossible for them to listen to humans. Dragon eggs were different. The ancestor dragons were typical wild beasts. They wouldn't be like the chromatic dragons, even if they already had their own senses and consciousness in the dragon eggs. As long as they could seize the dragon eggs, Stormwind would be able to nurture an army of its own dragon knights in time. It wasn't that the current griffins weren't useful. Although griffins were easier to tame, their combat power was still inferior to that of the dragon race. This had been proven through countless battles. Secondly, the Wildhammer dwarves were the best at taming griffins in the Alliance. It could be said that the Wildhammer dwarves had the best griffin population in their hands. If Stormwind wanted to further develop its own air force, it would be necessary to have an exclusive aerial race. The Night Elves had hippogriffs, the Blood Elves had draconic hawks, the dwarves and pygmies had griffins, and the humans had ancestor dragons. Anyway, as long as they didn't directly control a large number of chromatic dragons, the Dragon Sleep Shrine wouldn't have any objections. It's a pity that the Kiraji insect people aren't used to cold areas. William muttered to himself. William, don't be greedy. Besides, those insects aren't directly under Stormwind. Valilla's words made William laugh. The following battle could be said to be daunting, but not dangerous. When the Vrykhol's forces that could be used for a counterattack had been wiped out, it was time for the most orthodox siege battle. After smashing all the arrow towers and other things on the periphery, heavy cannons were never able to blast a towering fortress into the ground in the truest sense of the word. When a large amount of rubble was laid on top of the ruins, the cannons would also become ineffective. Cannons also cost money. In order to contribute to the remnants of the castle buried under the rubble, they had no choice but to send in the infantry. Young Salyafar's Blackrock Orc army came in handy at this time. With a continuous chant of Loktar, Ogre, the Vrykhol were overturned. The Vrykhol were slightly taller than the strongest orc, about 3 meters tall. Their strength was comparable to the orcs, but their agility was a notch lower. Their movements were sluggish and clumsy. What determined victory or defeat was the weapon. The Alliance's mass-produced fine steel weapons and multi-layer composite plate armor gave the orcs greater destructive power and better survivability. In fact, the concept of composite plate armor was also proposed by Duque. Considering the decreasing lethality of sharp weapons in close combat, as well as the larger enemies they would face in the future. With the physique of a human, being smashed by a 2.5-meter-tall orc with all its might was the same as being smashed by a 3-meter-tall giant with one blow. Therefore, Duque proposed the concept of composite plate armor. Its principle was similar to the reactive armor of the American main battle tank M1A1 in the last century. Its interlayer material provided better penetration resistance. Of course, a single soldier wouldn't be able to use something as high-end as reactive armor. What Duque developed was to change the original one layer of stamped plate armor into 2 layers of the same thickness. It was just that a large number of fixed small springs were installed in the 2 layers of plate armor, and then filled with a large amount of cotton to balance defense and warmth. This was because iron could make the human body lose heat faster. After repeated tests, the composite plate armor could greatly increase the survival rate of soldiers by more than 50% against attacks from heavy weapons such as hammers and sticks. The frontline soldiers all said it was good after using it. Of course, on the surface, Duque wouldn't favor one over the other. Even young Salyafar's troops who came to work were equipped with the composite plate armor of the orcs. He said that after this battle, the orcs could take the plate armor with them when they returned. Duque's generosity deeply moved a simple and valiant general like young Salyafar. Unfortunately, Duque wasn't a green-faced, fanged orc. Otherwise, young Salyafar might have knelt down and willingly become his lackey. Chapter 1576. The gap in strength between the Alliance and the Horde had widened to such an extent that there was no need for any tricks. The primitive industrial strength of the Horde meant that even if Salyafar took away the composite plate armor, he would not be able to replicate it. To make the plate armor from thick to thin without losing its original strength and toughness, this itself required better steel casting technology. That was a technology that even the goblins could not master, let alone the Horde. Even if the Rustwater conglomerate mastered this technology, it was another matter whether they would be willing to work for the Horde and create composite plate armor to meet the needs of millions of infantry. Even if the Horde could mass-produce it, it was time for the new generation of alloy armor to appear. Duque was full of stuff. If he wanted to get rid of the Horde, he could definitely make it so that the taillights of the Horde's car could not be seen. In the Battle of Utgard, Prince Karaseth of the Vrykhol was killed by Salyafar Jr. Ingvar, the plunderer guarding the center of the castle, was killed by Gavin Rad. Gotik Ashentai, the living statue of the ice mammoth who was resurrected by necromancy, was killed by Tyrion Fordring. A long time ago, because the Vrykhol protected the ancestors of the humans, they were hunted by the cruel Scotty. The Vrykul would name a person after a characteristic. Since it was cruel, one could imagine what kind of person this guy was. It was this long-lived Scotty who was personally beaten by Iril the Hoof. As for the king of the Vrykul, Imolan, he was naturally left to Varian. Everything seemed to be going well. If there were no problems, the alliance was likely to follow the plan and fight all the way north, taking care of Grizzly Hills and Zudak. But there were 9 out of 10 things in the world that did not go one's way. Duque had planned so much and prepared so well, but he still encountered a lot of F***king things. A seemingly insignificant event, and an out-and-out major event, happened almost at the same time. Khadgar sent a message. The Titan Guardian of Azeroth, Loken, the King of Wisdom, has sent an important message. He hopes that Master can personally go over. Alexstrasza suddenly sent a message in exasperation, that idiot Maligos has attacked the Icecrown Glacier. Duque was so angry that he said, F***ck, at the highest level of Karazhan more than 10 times in a row. The people around Duque rarely saw Duque lose his composure like this. In their eyes, Duque was always so confident, as if he was the god of fate who controlled fate. Vashj, who was starting to get familiar with Duque, was also a little surprised. Fortunately, everyone knew that Duque was not the kind of person who would get angry for no reason. At this time, Duque's 3 maids did not dare to go up and persuade him. Unknowingly, everyone's gazes turned to Aurelia, Duque's first and most intimate partner. Duque, what happened? Aurelia walked over slowly. Although her stomach was slightly bulging, she still looked elegant and charming. Duque raised his head on the chair and held his forehead with his hand. There was a clear sense of frustration in his voice. No, I'm just a little disappointed. There were some things that I knew would happen, and I did my very best to avoid them, but I still couldn't stop them from seeking death. This makes me feel a sense of powerlessness. Aurelia walked behind Duque and stretched out a pair of white jade-like arms from the back of the chair to gently massage Duque's temples. Don't blame yourself too much. You're a mere demigod, not a guardian appointed by the Titans, and definitely not the Titans themselves. I think even the Titans of creation, who are known to be omniscient and omnipotent, have things they can't do. Thinking of the bitter end of the Pantheon, Duque could not help but smile bitterly. That's true, I'm too focused on perfection. At this time, Aurelia gave the 3 maids a look. The maids immediately understood. Vashj naturally came up to massage Duque's legs. Solarian and Vanessa's reactions were a little funny. All along, Duque did not treat them as maids, but more like adjutants. What they did was basically fight and kill in Duke's name and watch over the place. So when they came up, the situation was quite funny. The 2 of them were very stiff with their massage techniques. After a few massages, Duque raised his hand and said, all right. I'm not that delicate. If you want to enjoy yourself, wait until you kill the Burning Legion. You can leave. Aurelia can stay. Aurelia nodded, and the 3 maids quickly left. Duque gently pressed his ear against Aurelia's lower abdomen. Here, I'm stressed because I know better than anyone the terrifying situation I'll face in the future. I've been working so hard to preserve Azeroth's vitality as much as possible. But this time, I've realized that since some people can't be controlled, they'll definitely court death. So be it. I'll build a truly united and invincible army that can fight against the Burning Legion. Aurelia kissed Duque's forehead with infinite gentleness on her face. It's okay, we all know you're the best. You're the great hero of this world. Think about it, if you weren't so great, such an outstanding Windrunner, how could the 3 Windrunner sisters give themselves to you and be willing to have children with you? Thank you. Whether Duque was angry or hesitant, all negative emotions were temporary. After he sorted out his thoughts, he once again summoned the leader of the Alliance and Alexstrasza for a magic video conference. Everyone, I have bad news to tell you. Just 15 minutes ago, the dragon aspect, king of magic Malygos, killed his way into the ice-crowned glacier in the name of revenge for his partner, Sindagosa. At the same time, the ancient guardian, Loken, the king of wisdom, sent a message to discuss the creator's sanctuary. At this point, Duque pressed hard on the table in front of him, and his whole body leaned forward, revealing a strong aura. What I want to say is that we're facing two major crises at the same time. The first is the possible betrayal of the king of magic. The second is the conspiracy of the king of wisdom, Loken. What? Wait. The red dragon in the video was anxious. Malygos isn't going to betray us. First of all, he might not lose. Even if he loses, he won't lose his life and become a bone dragon, right? Moreover, he's very good at escaping. Magni was also a little anxious. What's going on with that Loken? The conspiracy of the ancient guardian? Duque first looked at Alexstrasza. The beautiful red dragon had a clear look of anxiety on her face. He could imagine that Nesario's betrayal back then had already broken her heart. As the big sister of the five-colored dragon aspect, she would always charge at the front in every battle in order to block more firepower for her brothers and sisters. In the past, Duque had tolerated it in order to maintain a friendly relationship with the Dragon Slumber Shrine. When he couldn't bear it anymore, there was no need to bear it anymore. Chapter 1577. He had had enough of Malygos's stupidity, and he had had enough of playing the heartbeat game with this lunatic every now and then. Duque finally flipped the table of his mind in anger. With a sullen face, he spoke with the most solemn expression and tone. I've never been stingy with imagining the worst-case scenario with the greatest malice. Then, there are two things in front of us. Loken's problem has been confirmed. Although he hid it well, I smell a terrible smell on him, the smell of the ancient god Yogg-Saron. At the mention of Yogg-Saron, no matter who it was, their faces did not look good. None of the ancient gods were useless. They did not expect another ancient god to appear just after they killed Seat Thun. Everyone immediately thought of the problem of the planet's will. 25,000 years ago, because they found that the ancient gods and astral souls were too deeply entangled, eliminating a few ancient gods at once would only kill astral souls. That was why the titans of the pantheon let them go and sealed them instead. 25,000 years had passed, and Azeroth astral souls had gradually grown and begun to have their own will. That was why Duque communicated with the planet's will on Kiraj and joined forces with the Sleeping Dragon Temple and Elun to completely kill Seat Thun. Astral Soul's current condition? Kalia asked. Duque shook his head. Last time was equivalent to humans cutting off their own flesh to heal. Although the abscesses were removed, the wounds would eventually heal, but not so quickly. Astral souls only survived the most dangerous period. Let's talk about Yogg-Saron first, the Red Dragon Queen said. Of course, Duque knew what she was thinking. If Yogg-Saron's situation was more serious, as a dragon aspect, she had a reason to deal with the ancient gods first, and then deal with Malygos. Duque did not refuse. He told her the history he knew. Loken was the ancient god-watcher created by the Titans in Azeroth, the external guardian of Odor. Other than the Pentashade dragons, there were also 8 Titan guardians who were of the same status as the Titans. Loken was one of the Titan guardians. He represented wisdom. There were also Storm, Winter, Life, Order, and Invention, the 5 Titan guardians, Odin, Great Guardian Laden, and a Creator's Engine Guardian. Located in the northern part of Noscent, east of the Ice-Crown Glacier, Odor was the largest of the 3 laboratories built by Titan on Azeroth. The goal was to develop a perfect creature, and the evolution of a creature required time. Since the Titans wouldn't stay on the same planet for too long, they would visit and observe from time to confirm their progress. There were also many assistants and servants to help manage the laboratory. These were all created by Titan himself. When the Titans visited for the second time, they discovered that the laboratory had been invaded by the ancient gods and that the entire planet was under their rule. After fighting with these stubborn enemies, they discovered that because they had deeply infected the laboratory, they couldn't be completely wiped out. As such, they decided to seal them away in the depths of Azeroth. The one who infected Oder the most was Yogg-Saron, and he was also sealed here. The entire laboratory was sealed. The name Yogg-Saron was first mentioned in the Grizzly Hills, where there was a withered world tree, Vaudrasil. If one had a good relationship with the bear monsters, they would tell adventurers that in ancient times, the Night Elven Druids planted this world tree, but because the roots were too deep, they even reached the lair of the ancient god Yogg-Saron. The dark power of the ancient god began to leak, and the Night Elven Druids were afraid that Vaudrasil would cause a huge disaster, so they destroyed the world tree. Later, some of the nearby bear monsters began to replant Vaudrasil, which had been broken into 3 pieces, and planned to resurrect Ushuk, the great bear god who had died in the ancient war. In the end, Ushuk was resurrected by the bear monsters, but he was already contaminated by the ancient god. With the help of adventurers, some of the bear monsters finally used the purified dust of Vaudrasil to purify Ushuk. After introducing this terrible history of contamination, Duque concluded, now everyone has an idea of Yogg-Saron's ability to contaminate, right? Loken is not the head of the Titan Guardians set up by the Pantheon in Azeroth. I received news that Odin, the manager of Oder, has gone into self-exile. The other Guardians are not in normal condition, and I found the scent of Yogg-Saron in the video communication sent by the other party. At this point, Duque pressed his hands heavily on the table. I can be absolutely sure that Loken, the King of Wisdom, has fallen into madness. He has been corrupted by the ancient god, and secretly plotted to murder the other Guardians and tampered with Oder's files. Hiss. Everyone gasped. Everyone was used to the whispers and corruption of the ancient god. Previously, there had been a good dragon aspect, Nesario, who had been corrupted. Now that there was a Guardian rebellion, it was not unacceptable. Duque had peeked at Sargera's past achievements from Mediv, so no one doubted his words. For a moment, everyone felt immense pressure. A Lich King was troublesome enough, and an ancient god had appeared at the same time. It would be a huge problem if they left it alone. Now, there was also the Blue Dragon King involved. Just as Alexstrasza was about to say something, Duque slammed the table. Alexstrasza, you don't have to persuade me. The matter of Malygos was related to my foundation in the divine domain. If I attacked Oder or Icecrown Fortress with all my strength, only to have Malygos break through my magic net in the end, that would truly be the end of me. Before the matter of Malygos is resolved, I will not step into Oder or Icecrown Glacier. As the saying went, people of the same trade were enemies. Even if Malygos, the self-proclaimed king of magic in the world of Azeroth, and Duque, who controlled the weave, claimed to be in different fields, at the end of the day, it involved the distribution of core interests, who got more elemental energy from the major elemental realms, and who got less. If one had more, the other would naturally have less. In the past, they were comrades in the same trench, and the cake was big enough that they could barely coexist peacefully. Now that no one was optimistic that Malygos would succeed in finding trouble with Arthas, there would be many variables. It was not that the Red Dragon Queen could not understand Duque's approach. She was caught in the middle, and she was not a dragon either. On one side was her brother, and on the other was her most important ally. And the power of mortals could be said to be getting stronger. It was impossible for the dragon aspect to increase its power. However, the upper limit of mortals was only at the level of astral souls. With Duque, Sylvanas, Vashj, and the Karaji twin emperors, the power and opinions of mortals could no longer be ignored. Chapter 1578. Let's wait and see. What else could Alexstrasza do? That was all she could say. The meeting ended on a sour note. Everyone knew that there would be a result soon. Malygos, the king of magic, was never the kind of dragon that could last for long. His magic was more like a wave. When there was a huge disparity in strength, he could instantly kill his opponent. When the disparity was not big, he could hurt his opponent. He might even be able to use his dragon body to resist the enemy's counterattack and kill him. If he could not hurt his opponent, he would not be surprised. He would lose if he lost. The arrogant Malygos rushed into Arthas' lair, the Ice Crown Fortress. Arthas even opened the magic defense array above the Ice Crown Fortress for him so that the Blue Dragon King could directly come to the Ice Throne. Ordinary Calamity grades had no chance of winning against the King of Magic of the dragon race. Since resistance was meaningless, it was better to fight it out directly. Sitting on the Ice Throne, Arthas could only see two glints of blue light from the Lich King's helmet. He silently watched the icy blue behemoth slowly descend from the sky. It pounced on the shining blue wings that did not belong in this gray sky. Every time it flapped its wings, the cold air swept across the entire Ice Crown Fortress like an ice storm. The temperature, which was already cold enough, dropped even further. The absolute zero turbulence easily covered the entire area above the Ice Crown Fortress with thick snow except for the Ice Throne. Roar! A dragon roar sounded. In the few layers near the Ice Throne, every undead was shocked by this primordial roar that seemed to come from the distant past. This roar came from the overlord of the planet that had been at the top of the food chain for 25,000 years, the dragon race. This dragon roar belonged to a king of magic who controlled the elements. The terrifying pressure of the two domains directly made the slightly weaker elite undead warriors feel unstable. It was as if the soul fire nestled in their decaying chest could be extinguished at any time. Descending from the clouds, Malygos did not directly land on the square at the top of the Ice Crown Fortress. He flapped his dark blue wings and hovered above the Ice Throne. His golden eyes were like a pair of golden balls made of gold, and he looked at Arthas, who was sitting upright on the throne of ice with a kind of coldness that belonged to the ruler of the elemental world. The guy who called himself the Lich King had no intention of standing up. He still sat on the throne, which made Malygos very unhappy. However, he liked the feeling of looking down on his enemy. Despicable blasphemer Arthas! You should know why I'm here. Malygos let out a rumbling sound, and under his huge blue jaw, his white beard fluttered in the surging cold wind. Syndagosa? Arthas's voice was filled with obvious disdain. I was just worrying about the lack of air forces, and here you are. Although I don't believe in luck, it does seem to exist. Malygos' face became very interesting. Perhaps in this master dragon's imagination, even if Arthas didn't kowtow as if he had seen a god, he should be trembling. He really couldn't see any possibility of Arthas defeating him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have charged into Ice Crown Fortress alone to find trouble with Arthas. Of course, he had absolute confidence in his own strength. At the same time, he was also here to take advantage of the situation. Winter's Embrace Lake wasn't far from his lair. With Duque as bait, the combined attack of Alexstrasza and Elun was completely within his range of perception. He was absolutely aware of how serious Arthas' injuries were. Who knew that he would be treated as an idiot who was delivering food to the other party? How could the proud Malygos not be angry? Presumptuous, accompanied by a terrifying dragon's roar, the cold wind under Malygos' dark blue wings was like clouds of ice, with specks of blue cold light in the clouds. After these scattered lights descended, the frost elements above the entire Ice Crown Fortress became chaotic. The frost elements that were supposed to bow to the Lich King all worshipped and offered their loyalty to the primordial king of magic in the world of Azeroth. It felt terrible to be deprived of control of the subordinate elements. In the elemental world, Arthas's hearing should have been the sound of countless strings breaking. In practically a single exchange, the elements that Arthas could control were reduced to a pitiful area of less than 10 meters around the ice throne. The huge ice crown fortress had almost become Maligo's territory. His blue eyes still emitted a dim light. This time, Arthas finally stood up. Facing the smug blue dragon king, Arthas smiled. This. Perhaps it should be attributed to some kind of inorganic sound similar to laughter. It sounded hollow and strange. Maligos, you are indeed very strong. Ever since Duke Marcus set despicable traps for me again and again and mobilized a large number of strong people to surround me, I also feel that the quality of my subordinates is a bit lacking. You came just in time. Heh. Have you gone mad? Maligos raised his chin high, looking like he wanted to see what else he could do. Arthas held the hilt of Frostmourne with both hands and raised his head slightly. No, I just find it funny. Has my nickname changed from Lich King to King of Ice? Maligos' arrogant smile suddenly froze. If the other party was a pharaoh or someone who relied on the elements for a living, when all the other party's elements were controlled by him, the ancestor of magic, the result would be a beating. Maligos calmed down. Liches play with corpses. I'm not afraid even if Sindagosa comes out alive. There are no corpses of top experts for him to enslave. Before the Blue Dragon King's imagination could end, Arthas had already solved the mystery himself. Hee. Arthas let out a sound that should have been a sneer. Why would someone as great as me allow the vulgar you to come before my throne? It's to let you personally taste the 10,000 years of regret that you forged with your own hands. The Frostmourne in his hands suddenly became as large as the sky. Although it was just a shadow, some things that were bound in the shadow of the huge rune sword almost made Maligos collapse on the spot. No! No! Don't come over, like a frightened girl, Maligos screamed and turned around to fly. However, the blue dragon shadows behind him were faster than him. Father, your majesty, great majesty, darling. Chapter 1579. No, don't come over, Maligos flapped his wings with difficulty and continued to flee with all his might. However, no matter how fast he was, he could not overcome the resistance of the air and storm, let alone fly faster than the souls of his compatriots. In the blink of an eye, he was caught up. That's right, the ones pestering him were the blue dragons who had betrayed him in the ancient war. Despite knowing that his entire race was in a weakened state, he still mobilized his army in a fit of rage, which ultimately led to the death of all the blue dragons, his most loyal guards, his most beloved children, and his most beloved blue dragon queen, Sindagosa. It was that battle that almost wiped out the entire blue dragon race. If Krasis hadn't secretly helped Maligos hide a few blue dragon eggs during the ancient war, the blue dragon race would have been even worse off. However, this fiasco had obviously become a nightmare for Maligos that he could not get rid of for 10,000 years. He had also given up treatment because of this extremely tragic blow, and hid in a small black hole for 10,000 years. It was not until Duque helped him kill Nethario that his mental state improved a little. Who knew, the nightmare would come again. These dragons had all died on the battlefield in the ancient war, and even their remains had not been transported back to the Dragonbone Wilderness for burial. They were victims who had died outside. Unable to return to their roots, and unable to rest in peace after countless days and nights of anticipation for 10,000 years, these dragon souls had long become extremely twisted and crazy. If Maligos was still a normal dragon king, with his own characteristics as a dragon aspect and strong willpower, not to mention dealing with a group of dragon souls, he might not even be able to take Jaden's Darkness of 1,000 Souls head-on. However, what Arthas had directly released was an ultimate move that Maligos could not resist at all. If he really dared to face Sindagosa, he would have done it when Duque had reminded him to collect his wife's remains. It was precisely because of the death of his wife and children that his willpower was greatly weakened, and he became a psychopath. What was trapped by Frostmourne was, of course, the real souls of his wife and children. In the past, he did not dare to face them. Every night when he was asleep, he would wake up because of them. Now that he was facing the souls, Malygos broke down on the spot, and wanted to run away while crying. What arrogance! What glory! What dignity! All of it. Trying to run? Is this prince's throne something you can come and go as you please? Arthas let out a cold laugh. He took a step forward, and a stairway made of ice suddenly rose up at high speed. In the next instant, Arthas shot out like a cannonball, like a compressed spring. In the face of a peerless expert, this kind of attack that seemed to be a one-way trip was simply like sending food to his death. Against a dragon king who had lost his confidence and was on the verge of a mental breakdown, this was the only way for Arthas to achieve a quick victory. Vengeful spirits and disturbances could only confuse a true expert for a short moment. No matter how much Arthas saw Malygos, he had already suffered at the hands of Duque time and time again. He could only treat Malygos as his strongest enemy. He's a dragon king after all, right? As it turned out, Arthas had overestimated Malygos. He had simulated it countless times in his imagination. For example, Malygos would suddenly wake up in the chaos and use his dragon tail or other more powerful skills to counterattack. In the end, he didn't even need to use it. Frostmourne plunged deeply into the Blue Dragon King's chest without any suspense. Based on the feeling and the soul feedback from the runic magic sword, Arthas knew that this sword had succeeded. If the remnant souls of Sindagosa and Malygos' children had only troubled this Blue Dragon King on a purely spiritual level. Now, it had penetrated deep into the concept of the soul. The huge skull on Frostmourne seemed to be smiling sinisterly. Along the huge and cold evil blade, the true soul cores of Sindagosa and Malygos' children were forcibly injected into the Blue Dragon King's body, entangling with their king's soul. He. Arthas laughed coldly. She pulled out her sword and descended, allowing the Blue Dragon King, who was howling in fear after being injured, to flap its wings and fly away. So, this is how it feels to be in control of the fate of a top-notch expert. This feels so good. Under the thick full helmet, the ghostly blue eyes flickered non-stop. Arthas's entire body began to fall. He had only fallen into the air when the cold wind rising from the ice throne had already caught him and slowly allowed him to descend back onto the throne. Seeing the huge blue dragon flapping its wings and flying far away, Blood Queen Lanais hurriedly approached the throne. Supreme Lich King. Arthas waved his hand. No. Let him go. We'll go inside the gate of divine wrath. In less than half a day, the news that the Blue Dragon King had been severely injured by the Lich King and had to flee with serious injuries spread throughout the entire allied army. Most of the Alliance and Horde leaders were shocked. After all the previous reports said that Arthas had been tricked by Duque and had been beaten until he spat out ketchup or something. Who knew that he would cripple Malygos, one of the planet's top forces, and could only flee with his tail between his legs? Arthas's strength is on a completely different level when he's outside the Ice-Crown Glacier than when he's inside. Everyone thought in this direction. Although Alexstrasza was worried about Malygos' serious injuries, she was even more relieved that Malygos did not die in the Ice-Crown Citadel and become a bone dragon under Arthas' command, just as Duke had said. Malygos, She even tried to communicate with her brother using magic. In the image, Malygos was in a very bad state. His dragon face was clearly lacking color. Seriously injured, but still alive. This was the conclusion the Red Dragon Queen came to. Malygos only replied with one word, humph. Then he turned off the communication. She was not surprised. Malygos was like this, arrogant and unaccepting. She completely understood that he must be very upset after suffering such a sudden defeat. He did not want his sisters to see him embarrassed. He was already giving them face by answering her message. In her perception, Malygos did not look back and flew directly to the west of Northrend. That was where his lair towering in the sky on the island was located, the magic pivot. Alexstrasza turned to give Duque a warning. Malygos is not in a good state, but he is still a member of the Sleeping Dragon Temple. I will pretend that I did not hear what you said before. Did you communicate with him using magic? Can you send me the image of the communication? Duque asked instead. The Red Dragon Queen put her hands on her hips and frowned. She was obviously a little unhappy. I saw it with my own eyes. He was defeated, injured, and humiliated. To a dragon king, a dragon aspect, the dragon aspect. There is nothing worse than this. If you want to rub salt in the wound, then I am sorry, but this will make me hate you. What else could Duque say? He could only remain silent. Chapter 1580. They were brothers and sisters, but their bones were still connected. If Duque said too much, it would seem like he was trying to sow discord between them. Originally, Duque had a lot to say to Alexstrasza, but when the words came to his mouth, he couldn't say a word. It was just that his vigilance towards Malygos was at its peak. As he cut off the magic communication with the Red Dragon Queen, Duque sent a level 1 alert in the Alliance. Magni, it's still about Malygos. Suspend the war on the Western Front. All mobile troops retreat to the nearest large town, preferably a fortress. Move Naxxramas back to the holy city of Inkyra to cover the vanguard of the Western Front. We have to get our troops back as soon as possible. That big blue lizard, sigh. Speaking of which, aren't we afraid of provoking Alexstrasza by doing this? Magni also had a headache. Duque said firmly, I'm the commander of the Alliance. She can be emotional, but I can't. I have to be responsible for the lives of millions of soldiers. Should we inform the tribe? I'll tell Thrall now. As for what the tribe does, we don't care. Seeing Duque's expression, Magni already knew what was going on. Duque had already calculated everything. It was rare for the Warsong clan to return to a land rich in prey. It was a feast after 25 years of hardship. While the Alliance was busy conquering Northrend, the Warsong clan's vanguard stationed in the North Wind Tundra was more like occupying territory. Mining, hunting, slaughterhouses. Almost all the traditional tribal industries could be found near this newly built Warsong stronghold. Would they be willing to suddenly evacuate? Duque used magic communication to find Thrall. Thrall was very concerned about Duque's serious warning. What? Azeroth's aspect, the Blue Dragon King Malygos, was seriously injured by Arthas. He might go insane and rebel? Thrall was shocked. The tribe didn't get on the Dragon Slumber Temple's good side because the old tribe had enslaved the Red Dragon Queen. The tribe didn't expect to get any help from the dragons. In any case, he was an ally of an ally, so he was still his ally. Now that their relationship was passable, it was fine. Who knew that the Dragon Slumber Shrine would actually produce this brainless king? Since he couldn't beat Arthas, he might even turn around and cause trouble? Sal was stunned. There was no way Thrall would let the Draenor immigrants who had just arrived in Kalimdor go on an expedition without a firm foothold. The ones going to Northrend this time were Blackstone and Warsong of the Beastman's Cornerstone clans. Sar only left his Frostwolf clan in Kalimdor. It was precisely because Sal believed that Duque would not harm his compatriots that he sent these two clans who could fight. All along, he had been following Duque, so there was still some meat, but how much was another matter. The tribe did not contribute much, so Sal was too embarrassed to ask Duque for things. Duque was also famous for his kindness. Now that Duque said that Malygos was a trap, Thrall accepted this reality without hesitation. I will immediately inform the troops in the Northwind Taiga to evacuate. Having been with the Alliance for a long time, Thrall also realized the importance of instant communication. The tribe was not as rich as the Alliance, which normalized magic communication and assigned communication tools to squadrons. But the Warsong stronghold was still notified. Who knew that the news that came back from the Warsong clan would make Sal's heart go cold? What? Gurus arrived at the Warsong stronghold 3 days ago and pulled the main force out to hunt? Letting Gurus go was purely for the purpose of training. Sal had thought that there was no war on the Western Front, so it would be good to let Gurus go to the northern region to see the world. Who knew that this would happen soon after he was sent? Sal's face turned white. Just as Sal wanted to deal with this matter further, the magic pivot had already changed. It happened more than half a day ago. Maligos rarely contacted Alexstrasza. I have something for you. I can't leave. Arthes has moved. He's behind the Heaven's Wrath Gate. I can feel his presence. Then you can send an ancient dragon to get it. That Kristasa I met before is not bad. Let her come. Although the Red Dragon Queen had doubts, out of trust in her brother, she did not think much and directly sent the female ancient Red Dragon over. No one had expected that Kristasa would be attacked as soon as she entered Maligos' lair in the magic pivot. Maligos caught her off guard and bit the back of her neck. Then, his body, which was larger and more powerful than hers, pressed down on her with the weight of Mount Tai. No. King of the Blue Dragons, what are you doing? No, I was only ordered to get something. The poor female Red Dragon screamed, but she had no room to struggle. A sneak attack, coupled with the huge difference in strength, she was easily subdued. Kristasa's screams spread throughout the magic pivot. None of the blue dragons knew whether or not Maligos wanted to turn them into his consort. Only Maligos himself knew the answer. No matter what his intentions were, the blue dragons could hear her painful cries and the uneasy whispers she made as she gradually lost her mind. No one dared to question their king. Furthermore, male blue dragons were famous for their tastes. That. Even if Alexstrasza knew, she would only feel wronged for this poor female red dragon. The next day, Maligos, who seemed to be less nervous, walked out of his nest in high spirits. Although all the blue dragons noticed a black spot on their king's chest, no one made a sound. Maligos raised his head high and made a declaration that shocked the world. My battle with Arthes failed. There is only one reason for my failure. My power has been severely weakened. When the Titans of the Pantheon left Azeroth, they personally gave me the responsibility of guarding magic. However, shameless mortals have stolen my authority. Not only did they despicably develop their own way to use magic, they also bypassed my supervision. Without my permission as the King of Magic, they contacted the Star Souls and named themselves as demigods. Yes. This despicable, shameless human, his name is Duke Marcus. Now, in the name of the Dragon Aspects and the King of Magic, I order all intelligent races that can use magic, except the dragons, to immediately cut off all magic circuits and destroy all books and records about magic. And the self-proclaimed demigod of the Weave, Duke Marcus, immediately rushed over to kill himself in front of me and cut off his position as a god, returning to the cycle of life. Foolish mortals. I only give you 72 hours to complete all of this. Otherwise, you will face the endless anger of me and my blue dragon army. Chapter 1581. Only 72 hours? And Duque had to commit suicide? This time, even without Duque's reminder, even if Alexstrasza was slow and blinded by kinship, she came to her senses. Isra, something has happened to Maligos. He refused my summons and detained Kristasa. Isra hurriedly tried to contact Maligos through dreams, but she was immediately shocked. Sister. Malygos's state is very similar to Nisario's: madness, paranoia, chaos. He was now in a state of déjà vu, which made their hearts sink. Duque is right again. The Red Dragon Queen's voice made people feel as if she was dreaming. Sister, we have to make a decision, Isra whispered. Decision? Easier said than done. Ever since they were created by the Titans, they had gone through so many storms together. The special emotional bond between the chromatic dragon aspects could no longer be described in words. Nisario eventually fell into madness and betrayal because of the whispers of the ancient gods, which was enough to make Alexstrasza's heart ache. She did not expect that after 10,000 years, she would have to face the same heartache again. As a dragon aspect, it was not that she had never thought that she might fall, but it was not at the hands of the powerful Burning Legion demons, but at the claws of her brothers and sisters again. This heartache left her at a loss. In the end, Alexstrasza only said 2 words to Duque: sorry. Duque understood completely. It's not your fault. The Red Dragon Queen only replied to Duque with a sad smile and cut off the communication. Then the Alliance, Horde, and Sleeping Dragon Temple issued a joint statement. The Azeroth dragon aspect, Malygos, the King of Magic, was plotted against in a duel with the Lich King. Not only was he insane, but he was also fatally injured. After his death, he will become a bone dragon. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. This not only cast a thick haze over the unstoppable northern expedition, but also indicated that Arthas's strength had been greatly enhanced. The aftermath of its negative effects was still further fermenting. Inside the Gate of Heaven's Wrath, Arthas let out a cold laugh, as expected of my nemesis, Duke Marcus. He immediately guessed my little trick. But so what? Malygos is already my possession. Duque's guess was right. On the surface, Malygos was still alive and kicking, but in fact, his heart had been completely cut off by Frostmourne. However, Arthas still kept his heart beating, making Malygos look like he was still alive. If Duque hadn't discovered it, then according to the original plan, Malygos would still use this as an excuse to fight Duque over the weave. It might even drag the Dragon Sleep Shrine, who did not know the truth, into the whirlpool of internal strife. It's just that the way it is now is pretty good. A real Dragon King as a mount. Ha ha ha. The Lich King's maniacal laughter reverberated throughout the tunnels. In fact, from the moment Malygos barged into Icecrown Fortress like an idiot, everything was destined to be a tragedy. The only difference was how great the loss would be. The Blue Dragon Legion also had intense disagreements. Most of the Blue Dragons were at a loss. On one side was the strict order of their king, and on the other side was the appeal of the 4 dragon aspects, Alexstrasza, Isra, Nozdormu, and Onyxia. This was different from history. In history, Malygos was indeed an idiot when it came to this matter, but this was more like a battle for justice. That was why most of the Blue Dragons listened to Malygos's orders and even attacked the Dragon Sleep Temple. This time, there was clearly a conspiracy. After all, even the Blue Dragon Legion had heard that the former Lich King, Zul, had caused Arthas to fall. Therefore, when Kalegos, who guarded the sun well, unexpectedly publicly announced his opposition to Malygos's orders, the Blue Dragon Legion split. In the Blue Dragon Legion, there were only a little more than 10 ancient dragons or quasi-ancient dragons, and half of them chose to stand with Kalegos. The other half brazenly launched a fierce attack on the allied army and Duque's weave. On the North Wind Tundra, Gurus Hellscream was galloping wildly on a warg. He raised his axe high and let out a loud battle cry. Ha ha ha. This is the life the orcs should have. His words received widespread approval from the surrounding warriors. Yes. In that barren land, even the lowly laborers seemed to be more valuable than us warriors. Thrall saved millions of orcs from that collapsing world. At first, Thrall received countless praises. As time passed, a series of basic problems such as food, clothing, housing, and transportation caused the orcs to be in conflict. Most of the orcs from Draenor Nagrand were not satisfied with the barrenness of the land. They were not satisfied with the fact that the hides they hunted had to be collected by the Alliance in exchange for grains that they did not like. Even the pork of the pigs raised in the pigsty by the Alliance was not chewy and tasted bad. Only the sharp-toothed wild boar was the right way to go. They also handed over the clan's laborers to the tribe and arranged for them to mine in exchange for food. Their poor wisdom could not understand that Great Chief Thrall had to worry about not letting his people starve to death as much as possible. They would only complain about this and that. Until the northern expedition came. Seeing the fertile land in front of them that resembled Nagrand, seeing the heroic beasts, mammoths, long-haired rhinoceroses, giant spiders, killer whales of Dim Light Bay. The mixed Warsong tribe, which was mainly made up of Nagrand's old Warsong tribe orcs, were so excited that they forgot everything else. Most of them had forgotten the original goal of the crusade against the Lich King, and saw this northern expedition as a Warsong tribe's operation to seize territory. The most powerful tribe should have the most fertile territory. That was how they thought. The Alliance's action of minding their own business had indirectly stimulated the Warsong orcs' encirclement movement. Who knew that a nightmare would suddenly come? In the sky, dozens of giant dragons with blue wings and bodies swooped down from the clouds. Most of the orcs were torn to pieces by the violent rain of magic just because they saw the giant shadows looking up. Countless arcane bombs, frost arrows, blizzards, the blue dragons used a magic feast to open the prelude to the massacre. Blue Dragon Irigos, as the strongest supporter of Maligos, directly launched the fiercest attack on the Warsong stronghold. With a spread of his wings, dozens of compound magic arrays arranged like rings of stars suddenly appeared in the void. These magic arrays, which were the size of half a football field, had dragon runes on their surface flickering, making these magic arrays seem to form a bright belt of light. The belt of light emitted the unique purple glow of arcane magic. This light poured down on the Warsong stronghold, causing the extremely orc-style stronghold parts to twist, deform, and shatter, turning into countless scattered pieces that flew in all directions. Chapter 1582. In the sky, outside the compound magic formation, there were hundreds of looming veins of various sizes. These symbolized that Eligos was frantically extracting elements from a brand new magic net to support the operation of these powerful magic formations. In fact, he was not the only one benefiting. At this moment, a bright river of arcane light was hanging upside down over the entire Northwind Taiga. It floated in the sky where the cold wind howled, like a long river flowing with countless amethyst crystals, emitting a bright light. With its support, the combat power of these blue dragons had more than doubled. The Warsong orcs near the Warsong stronghold suffered a devastating blow. In the midst of the rumbling explosion, many orcs on the sentry towers were blown away with a bang, falling from high places and turning into large red and green meat patties. The unlucky soldiers below the stronghold were either thrown dozens of meters away by the violent explosion and landed heavily on the rugged slope, or had their heads cut in half by a piece of wood. There were also dozens of pieces of wood or iron that pierced through their bodies. They did not turn into corpses on the spot, but they had to suffer for a while before they died. In the wilderness, Garrush had a hard time catching a forgotten mage who was running around. It was a messenger. He grabbed the thin bone by the collar. "Where's the Alliance? Didn't those thin guys claim to be our allies? Now their allies have betrayed them. Have they betrayed us too?" The forgotten mage was in extreme pain. Although he did not feel any pain, he still struggled hard. Garrush's crude methods embarrassed him. The Sleeping Dragon Temple, the Alliance, and the Horde announced an hour ago that the Blue Dragon King Maligos had been corrupted and was already an enemy. "You ran too far, we couldn't find you at all." Garrush was greatly offended. because this meant that the blame was likely to be on him. He did not regret it because this was a normal hunt for the clan. In Nagrand, there had to be at least one such large-scale hunt every week, or the clan would starve. No, Garrush roared hoarsely. This is all the fault of the Alliance. This is a trap. They put us here on purpose to lure us. As expected, despicable outsiders cannot be trusted, Garrush roared. Little did he know that when he vented his anger and roared, he had unintentionally stated at least one truth. The Forgotten Mage bitterly said, the Wormrest Temple is not under the Alliance's control. Even Alexstrasza couldn't stop the Blue Dragon King from going crazy and challenging Arthas. This has nothing to do with the Alliance. Moreover, the Alliance was also attacked. He expressed the opinion of the majority. There was nothing wrong with that logic. The Alliance army had a faster reaction time than the Horde because other than the Magic Communication Direct Squadron, the Alliance had many other rapid communication systems. In addition to the spiritual communication of the Night Elves, there was also the divine power communication that only the members of the Elun Sisterhood could use. After magical communication became chaotic and intermittent due to Maligos creating a second weave, divine communication became the most effective and fastest method. It was a pity that there were too few female priests who had the ability to use divine power communication. Only high-ranking priests could do so, and they would not be able to use it unless it was a critical moment. What the Alliance was testing was the telegraph. After diesel engines became popular, Duque spent a lot of effort to develop and promote electromagnetic induction generators. It was not difficult to generate electricity by constantly rotating electromagnetic coils. As long as one was in an engineering university, there was no one who couldn't do it. With the advent of electricity, the invention of the telegraph was inevitable. The problem now was the decay of electricity and the problem of heat during the transmission of electricity. High-voltage transmission, then using substations to reduce the voltage back to civilian use. Duque understood the principle, but to put it into practical use, it still required a lot of practice and experiments. At the moment when Duque's weave was being challenged, it was indeed a good time to launch the telegraph system. The closer it was to Maligos' lair, the less efficient Duque's weave was. Of course, the part of the weave that Duque concentrated on protecting was still working well. For example, the two large fulcrum points, Naxxramas and the Fearless Stronghold. The Alliance's communication system did not collapse, and naturally, its defense showed extremely exaggerated efficiency. In the magic mirror, when Duque saw the blue dragons flying from the horizon, he couldn't help but complain, who on earth gave them the courage to challenge us? Then Duque added in a low voice, I bet it's not Liang Jingru. Seeing the blue baby dragons that were not even baby dragons, Bulang Bronzebeard also sighed. This is definitely a feast for the Dalajan mages. Dragon remains were rare and precious, not to mention the blue dragon scales, fur, and limbs that were rich in magic power. Because of their good relationship with the Sleeping Dragon Temple, except during the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, when the Red Dragon army was enslaved by the Horde, the Dalajan and Duque ruthlessly plundered a wave of Red Dragon materials. There was no such good opportunity again. Today, a good dragon skin of about 1 square meter could be sold for 10,000 Arather gold coins. After sighing, Bulang said loudly, prepare to use the cannons to tell those big lizards that the anger of mortals is too hot for them to bear. Oh, the soldiers below all showed a state of inexplicable excitement. Under the lead of an ancient colossal blue dragon, more than 10 adult blue dragons led hundreds of dragon whelps, as well as close to 10,000 dragon whelps. They spread their wings and rode the strong winds, sweeping over from 10 kilometers away. Although they were still far from the blue dragon's range of attack, the long river of light and shadow of the arcane magic that swayed in the void behind them had already made the soldiers of Naxxramas realize that if they were to judge their attack power based on their size alone, they would definitely suffer. The blue dragons moved faster than expected, and in just a few blinks of an eye, the blue dots on the horizon became bigger. Although they were still out of sight, with the help of the high-magnification periscope, the Alliance's gunners could even see the scales on their wings clearly. The deep blue eyes in the eye sockets and the long, crisscrossed dragon teeth made people feel even more uncomfortable. Naxxrama's was like this, and the fearless fortress was also facing a similar situation. At this time, Duque's voice sounded in the front line of the Alliance army. 23 years ago, in the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, I led your father's generation, a total of 200,000 troops in front of the wall of Thoradin, and it was difficult to move an inch, all because of the rampage of an ancient red dragon. Today, 23 years later, we face an even more exaggerated opponent. But I want to say, with the development of technology, mortals have really set foot on the world stage. We have cannons. We have airships. We have enough power to destroy all evil. So, I hope everyone will give these guys who dare to go against the tide of history a good look. What technology is. All troops, listen to my order, fire in turn. Chapter 1583. The 800mm cannon was the first to fire. As early as the end of the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the Alliance had already taken out a small steel cannon with a diameter of more than 1 meter. That kind of mortar with a very short range and a large arc trajectory was powerful, but its range was really not impressive. This 800mm cannon was the true definition of modern artillery. Its effective range was more than 30 kilometers. Because of its craftsmanship, it was different from the Gustav railway cannon in Earth's history. It used lighter shells, not the original 7.1-ton armor-piercing shells, but high-explosive shells that weighed only 2 tons and 1.5 tons of Type 3 shells. This greatly increased its firing speed. Moreover, with the dwarves who could carry the shells by themselves, even the loader was not needed, and the result was that it could fire 20 rounds an hour. This was a very impressive figure. One had to know that the original version could fire 14 rounds a day. Yes, that's right. It could only fire 14 rounds a day. Of course, every time a cannon was fired, it would definitely blow up the entire mountain. This new giant cannon, no matter what model, weighed more than 30 tons and could not be installed on any ship. Because no ship could withstand its terrifying recoil, and even a dozen brakes couldn't do it, the current craftsmanship could not be used as a railway cannon. In the end, it became an out-and-out Longsong cannon. Bulang Bronzebeard had shamelessly named this cannon, Bulang Cannon, by rolling on the floor of the throne hall. This huge cannon with a range of more than 10 kilometers shocked the blue dragons when it was fired. When they saw this shell coming at a high speed with an initial speed of more than 1 kilometer per second, they instinctively wanted to block this shell with magic. Unfortunately, when they greeted it with ice arrows, they were shocked to find that the shell was actually engraved with a magic protection array. A faint light lit up, and nearly 10 spells were completely absorbed. No more spells were fired. It was not an easy task to intercept a high-speed flying shell. Just now, more than 100 spells were fired, and only a few were hit. Then, there was an ear-shattering explosion. Countless blazing fragments sputtered out from the cannonball, and in an instant, the blue dragons in a spherical area with a radius of 100 meters were wiped out. Regardless of whether it was a baby dragon that was not much bigger than a wolf dog, a baby dragon that was 5 meters long and had a wingspan of 8 meters, or an adult dragon, all of them were hit by the third cannon Style 1 cannon. Countless pillars of blood spurted out of their bodies as they screamed and fell to the ground. Charge! Charge! The leading ancient dragon was starting to panic. With the hardness of his scales, he would be able to take the blast head-on. However, he was the only ancient giant dragon in the entire blue dragon troop. Fortunately, each stronghold only had 3 or 4 Longsong cannons. Although the power was great and the sound was frightening, the low frequency of the bombardment made the loss within an acceptable range. The Blue Dragon began to accelerate. Within the range of 5,000 meters. The flying battleships and medium-caliber cannons on both sides of the stronghold also began to fire. After a flash of flame and rising smoke, the cannonball came whistling over. In the deafening roar of the cannons, the damage caused by these 400mm cannons also shocked the Blue Dragons. They had no choice but to use their S-shaped maneuvers to rush over. Even closer, on the wall of the fortress on the side facing the dragons, countless complicated and intricate arrays suddenly flashed through the holes. In the void, there were also purple magic veins that provided magic support for these large and small arrays. Immediately, countless fireballs, ice arrows, and arcane cannonballs smashed out. With the support of the large-scale war arrays, these spells had a longer range and more power than ordinary mages' spells. A magic storm welcomed in front of the Blue Dragons. The dense spells crossed hundreds of meters and swept across the entire group of dragons like a storm in May. This time, these flying dragons that came to attack the Alliance under the command of their Mad King no longer had any luck. The high-density and powerful anti-air cannons and magic made all dodging and defense meaningless. In an instant, their wings were pierced or their bodies were directly blown up, and they fell from the sky while wailing. The land and the sea in front of the two strongholds were all dyed by this dirty blue blood rain that exuded arcane brilliance. That's it? On the two strongholds, the gunners operating the short-range anti-air cannons were stunned. My 8-barreled cannon hasn't even been fired yet. The concentrated anti-air cannons often did not have a good range. The real effective range was often about 500 meters. Since the long-range cannons had been solved with Type 3 bombs, then there was no need for the short-range anti-air cannons. A group of nervous anti-air cannons before the war all had constipated expressions. A middle-aged officer slapped the back of the head of the complaining gunner and scolded, "Damn it! If Commander Marcus could come up with so many good things during the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, I wouldn't have to shiver like a cat in a pond." The gunner touched the back of his head, which was a little painful. "Why didn't Sir Commander take them out back then?" "Bullshit. Technology is not that easy to make a leap. Even if Sir Commander is a true genius, it still takes countless scientists and craftsmen to turn his vision into real equipment step by step." In the North Wind Taiga, the situation of the Alliance and the Horde formed a sharp contrast. The Warsong clan was like a rabbit being chased, with countless beastmen being chased all over the mountains. The Blue Dragons used magic to wreak havoc on the squads of beastmen soldiers who dared to resist. From time to time, they swooped down and hooked the beastmen with their sharp claws, tearing them apart in the air, or catching them in midair and throwing them down in freefall. Garush lost his mind and angrily ordered the wyverns to attack. As a result, in front of the purer chromatic dragons, the wyverns that had once swaggered around were all trembling. The lucky ones directly ran away with their knights, not listening to any commands, but at least they managed to keep their lives. The unlucky ones were directly targeted by the adult blue dragons. Two blue dragons flew over, grabbed the wyverns with even more rapid movements, and tore them into pieces in midair, forming a stinking rain of blood. The Alliance, it's all the Alliance's fault." Garush roared wildly, but he really couldn't do anything about the flying lizards that were flying high and low. After the few wyverns and a few ballistae were slaughtered or destroyed, the Warsong clan on this land completely collapsed. At the same time, in the elemental domain invisible to mortals, Duque was engaged in a real magic battle with Maligos. Chapter 1584. Duque had once imagined that the two webs would fight for Azeroth's elemental energy, just like a hacker war. The two opponents would stay in areas where they couldn't see each other, remotely controlling everything in the network world, frantically attacking each other's positions, searching for each other's location, in order to deal a fatal blow. In reality, Duque had thought too much. If this battle for the Demon King was described as a hacker war, it was more like one side had prepared a virus, a firewall, and so on, while the other side ran to the other side's building and pulled the switch. What kind of illusory war was this? Because both sides knew where the other was, the so-called magic war was like a brawl from the start. Duque had never thought that Malygos, who was destined to die, would be so shameless as to think of a way to cut off the flow of elemental energy in the upwind path where Karazhan was located. As the magic guardian dragon left behind by the Titans, he did indeed know a lot of the elemental mysteries of Azeroth, such as the specific location of the elemental river that extended from the planet's mantle, through the crust, and to the shallow surface of the upwind path. Malygos couldn't make such a large elemental river disappear completely, but he could make it temporarily change course. If Duque really was one of those traditional mages in Azeroth who relied on the mage tower to display their full strength, then he would be kneeling by now. The mage tower of Karazhan, which had once bloomed with dazzling arcane light day and night, now only maintained a minimum amount of light. Without the supply of elemental veins, the tower looked dim. To maintain the operation of the entire mage tower, they had to use the elemental energy stored in the elemental pool. For Duque, who was about to start a magic war, it could be said that his reinforcements had been cut off. He could certainly defend Karazhan to the death and continue to use Karazhan as the center of the webs to fight Malygos for control of the entire world's webs. This way, it would be like a lonely castle. Perhaps he could defend it for a while, but in the end, it would still fall. There was a saying in the art of war, a lonely city cannot be defended. Duque's lips curled into a cold smile. Arthas, good plan. Sindagosa was a good fighter. She had been ambushed by Duque, and Arthas naturally felt that it was a pity. But it wasn't painful. Because the fallen Malygos was the powerful subordinate he truly desired. With the powerful physical body of a dragon king and the magical ability that Arthas desperately lacked, such a powerful undead was the only thing that could truly help Arthas. Over here, Duque had clearly beaten Arthas into a dog, but Malygos, the brainless pig of a teammate, had to go over to serve himself. Duque was also speechless. When Malygos no longer acted on his own fantasies and delusions, he immediately became a super expert. For example, if Malygos successfully dismantled Duque's magic net core and inflicted heavy damage to Duque's magic net, the several 100,000 allied armies in Nocent would immediately lose their most powerful defensive magic system. All of the alliance's mages would lose 50% of their power, as most of the military mages used the weave as a standard for learning and casting spells. Without the weave, many mages who forcefully advanced felt as though they were in a desert of elements, unable to draw even the slightest bit of elemental energy to support their magic. At that time, if Arthas joined forces with Malygos to launch a large-scale ice storm or something, the allied army would definitely suffer heavy losses, and they might even be in danger of being wiped out. Fortunately, Malygos, you're so inexperienced that you don't even know what the Cloud Age is, right? As a transmigrator who had experienced the birth of the Internet to its explosive development, there were too many concepts on the Internet that could be used for reference in the magic net. For example, the battle between single-core and multi-core. There was also the concept of cloud storage. Malygos was now like a super single-core computer with a super high-frequency CPU. His data storage ability and computing ability were all crushing Duque's. This was where his pride came from. Even if Duque had the help of the system elf, he might not be Malygos' match in a one-on-one fight. After all, as the king of magic, his brain capacity and ability to command and cast multiple spells were definitely godly in the truest sense. However, ever since Duque established the magic net, he had never intended to play with a single-core CPU. What he played was a classic multi-core. From Khadgar as the core, to the Demon King Vek lore who later joined as the secondary core, and then to the group of elemental emissaries. Then there were Jaina and Solarian who were the support controllers, as well as the Kirin Tor assembly led by Kale, Bats and the high-ranked Dalajan mages. Almost every powerhouse above the Radiant Moon level was a commander in a certain area of the magic net. Duque had split up the authority of the magic net, causing the magic net to show unimaginable diversity. As for Khadgar and Duque's system elves, they only existed as coordinators. As for the cloud storage, it was actually the result of Duque's direct control of the magic nodes of most of the Alliance's main cities, transforming them into nodes of the magic net. Other than Darnassus, which was directly controlled by Elun, and Exodar, which was controlled by the Drenii, all the main cities were deeply connected to the magic net. The four major elements of earth, water, fire, and wind existed in parallel space across the entire planet of Azeroth. Every main city of the Alliance, in addition to having a superior geographical environment, was also the location of nodes of elemental veins of different sizes. Duque had completely copied the magic net blueprint and stored it in every main city of the Alliance that was under his control. It could be said that unless Malygos cut off the flow of magic nodes in all the main cities of the Alliance, as long as Duque's mind was connected to the magic net, he could send the highest authority to the magic net through any main city. In fact, after Malygos cut off the flow of the elemental river between the two main cities, he realized that something was wrong. Duque's control over the humans' magic net was not affected at all. Instead, he launched a fierce counterattack. First was the water element. Most blue dragons liked to play with the ice element. They felt that ice was very beautiful. Malygos' specialty was arcane magic, and he was also very good at playing with the ice element. Now, Duque's counterattack from the magic net made him very uncomfortable. Duque had cut off the supply of ice element to his magic core. Originally, Malygos had thought that this was impossible. The truth in front of him deeply stimulated him. Duque's virtual image was projected on a desolate island in the western outer sea of the North Wind Tundra. Next to Duque's projection stood a huge water elemental. "You've worked hard, Duke Hydarsis. My most loyal friend. It's an honor for us, the Hydarsia water elementals, to be able to serve you." This was the water elemental's way of returning the favor. Duque led the mortal heroes and killed the clone of the Balrog Ragnaros. He also cooperated with the Hydarsia water elementals to drown the entire molten core. The Hydarsia water elementals had always remembered this kindness. Chapter 1585. Duque couldn't figure out the connection between the water elemental creatures of the current material world and the water elemental world that coexisted in another space dimension in the world of Azeroth. Anyway, he could feel that the frost elements leading to the magic core had been completely cut off. It was the same kind of cut-off and diversion, but Hydraxia's water element was much more beautiful. Malygos's cut-off was actually a diversion, not a real cut-off. As long as Duque spent some time, he could still find a new elemental vein. The cut-off of the water element was really the kind that cut off without leaving a way out. Above the north wind taiga. Kacha. It was a sound that did not exist in the ears of mortals. Only existences sensitive to elements could hear this sound that sounded weak but was actually shocking. All the blue dragons who were fighting felt their hearts skip a beat. A huge wave of frost elements gathered from all directions in the north wind taiga. It wasn't gathering, but escaping. As if the stopper was pulled out of a water tank, all the frost elements near the Warsong stronghold were sucked into the void. Ripples of unease rippled in this elemental airspace, spreading in all directions. At this moment, all the Alliance and Horde mages in the North Wind Taiga could not sense the existence of frost elements at the same time. The only place that could make them feel the frost elements was Duque's magic net. Unfortunately, the magic net had shrunk so much that as long as they were more than 200 meters away from Naxxramas or the Fearless Stronghold, they could no longer summon frost elements. The blue dragons in the sky widened their eyes in horror. Their yellow vertical pupils looked left and right. At this time, they found that not only the water elemental world, but even the fire elemental world was no longer responding. Someone so powerful that they were unrivaled had forcibly cut off their connection with the fire elemental world. Alarms rang in their hearts. The blue dragons finally woke up from their dream of being invincible. Times had changed. It was no longer the era 25,000 years ago when the dragons covered the sky, stood at the top of the food chain, and could do whatever they wanted. Hydraxia's water element sealed the source of Maligo's frost element. By killing Lager's clone, Duque, who controlled part of the fire elemental realm's authority, also sealed the source of Maligo's fire element. At this moment, Maligo's dragon weave, which used the magic pivot as its core, seemed a little unworthy of its name. The only core element left in Maligo's was the arcane element. Azeroth magic was very interesting. There were 6 main categories: arcane, frost, fire, nature, holy, and shadow. The origin of the world was clearly earth, water, fire, and wind. Water and fire each formed their own system, but earth and wind were included in the natural system. Nature magic was generally considered to be on the side of shamans and druids, and was not considered to be part of traditional magic. Holy was on the side of priests. Although it was magic, it was not under Maligo's control. Not to mention an Ing. The Titan granted Maligo's the authority of the King of Magic, which was the authority to manage the magic of the 3 elements, arcane, ice, and fire. At this time, both ice and fire couldn't be used, leaving only the arcane element. Thus, the Warsong Beast men who were suffering in the vicinity of the Warsong stronghold were stunned to discover that the originally ferocious blue dragons, who were incessantly flapping their wings to drive away the ice elements and turn one beast man after another into ice sculptures, were suddenly silenced. The magic that could be used had become pure arcane magic. Gurus, who was still fighting fiercely below, could be said to have the deepest understanding of this. As a warrior who had stepped into the realm of heroes, Gurus was much more durable than the small fries. In addition, Sal valued him and gave him a set of Mount Hyjar-level warrior equipment. He became the only bright spot in this collapsed battlefield. In terms of hand-to-hand combat, Gurus was not inferior to these young or newly adult blue dragons at all. His gorgeous equipment allowed him to clean up one with a few axes. However, the blue dragons could also play magic. A large-scale, ice shield, no matter how fast you were, once you entered the range of the shield, you would slow down and suffer frost elemental damage. The jump slash he had learned from his father had become a clown's awkward move. Often, he would be frozen in midair like an ice sculpture the moment he jumped high. Even if the blue dragons did not slap him down with their claws or tails, he would still fall in a ridiculous free fall. The blue dragon suddenly couldn't use frost magic, so his chance came. With a big jump, he stepped on the wreckage of a ballista that had been blown away and performed a beautiful double jump. Garrush was like a rock spreading its wings, pouncing on a young blue dragon that could not dodge in time. In a panic, the young dragon barely flapped its wings and dodged to the left, but because of the angle and momentum, the dragon's neck was grabbed by Gurus, who reacted faster. With a backhand swing of his axe, Gurus chopped off the young dragon's neck. Holding the long dragon's neck in his hand and swinging the limp dragon's head, Garrush fell to the ground with a loud crash, raising a huge cloud of dust and letting out a deafening roar. Garrush, who had fallen into a frenzied state of killing, did not know a human proverb that someone had passed on to him: don't show off, or else you'll be struck by lightning. In every tribe, there would always be a small number of mutants. For example, Krasis of the Red Dragon clan was a rare master magician among the dragons. Galagos, the ancient blue dragon leading the team, was, in a sense, an ancient blue dragon that was not recorded in Azeroth's official history. However, he was indeed different from the blue dragons. For example, his element was wind. Seeing how Garrush was so awesome, killing several blue dragons in a row, and then demonstrating his might and roaring. Galagos sent a lightning strike to Garush. Bam! Just a moment ago, he had used a roar to replace who else. Garush, who had come to mock the group, collapsed on the spot, his long fangs gnawing on the frozen soil of the north wind tundra. Perhaps it was because of the dizziness and paralysis caused by the lightning strike that interfered with his movements, but Garush did not get up for a long time. Just as Galagos rushed down from the sky, a surging arcane dragon's breath brewing in his mouth, a 10-story tall human shadow suddenly appeared in the void. It was the shadow of Duke Marcus, the demigod of the weave. Duke's shadow raised his left hand gently, and a burly figure that looked 70 to 80% like Garush rushed out of a portal that suddenly opened. He leaped high like lightning, and the blood-red axe swung from bottom to top like a moon at the bottom of the sea. It was clearly an upward chop with similar movements, but this chop gave Garush an unparalleled shock to his soul. It was a chop that could split the heavens and the earth. The cold air hovering in the air, the storm, the turbulence of arcane elements. These things that could not be seen with the naked eye were all swept away by the aftermath of this chop. The next second, Galagos let out an extremely shocking scream. Chapter 1586. A guy who had the ability to severely injure an ancient dragon with an axe was rare, even among the heroes. If it was an orc, then the range was even smaller. Garush struggled to get up and looked into the sky. A blue claw as huge as the pillar of the hall was spinning in the air. In the background, there was a sky full of splashing blue-purple blood, shining with arcane light, and a giant dragon with a face full of fear. The ancient dragon, who had a mocking expression a moment ago, had its facial features squeezed together because of fear. An adult blue dragon fiercely pounced over. The green figure falling from the sky suddenly twisted his waist so that his body was parallel to the ground. In the next moment, the falling momentum suddenly stopped. This change in rhythm made the adult blue dragon, who was trying to sneak attack, extremely uncomfortable. Just as the blue dragon flapped its wings to slow down so that it could aim at the orc again, the tall and sturdy figure launched, intercept. A horizontal movement in the air that violated the laws of physics. A blood-red arc of axe light lit up again. Then, the dust settled. Another cloud of blood mist exploded. Another blue dragon that was struck down. The Blue Dragon Legion in the sky seemed to be completely shocked by this scene. They all let out terrified screams and flapped their wings in panic to escape at high speed. Only then did the tall and sturdy figure descend from the sky and land heavily in front of Garush. Under the effect of gravity, this figure was like a giant, but also like an insurmountable mountain. Mortals could only look up. Many middle-aged orcs recognized this great orc. Ah! It's Grom Hellscream. So young. I heard that he turned to the human demigods and became an oracle to obtain eternal life. What a pity. But he will always be the great hero of our clan and even the entire tribe. After a short moment of hesitation, the simple minds of the orcs made them unconsciously cheer for the real hero. Grom, 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 the Warsong Beast men who were lucky enough to survive the siege of the Blue Dragon Legion all beat their chests with their fists, using the most traditional and primitive method to pay their respects to their former chief, the great hero who would forever stand on the monument of their tribe. Looking at the familiar and unfamiliar face in front of him, Garush had mixed feelings. This face overlapped with the face of her father in her childhood memories. Young, arrogant, and filled with an insufferably domineering aura. There was no powerful prey that his father couldn't catch. Even the legendary powerful monster Gollin, who could not be dealt with by an entire clan, fell at his father's feet. That was why he was able to inherit a great surname, Hellscream. He would not be like those lowly laborers who did not deserve to have their own surnames. Garush's emotions were extremely complicated. Once upon a time, as a pure-blooded orc, he felt ashamed because his father was the first to drink the devil's blood. When he found out that his father had not betrayed the tribe, but had successfully killed Manoroth, who had deceived the entire tribe, he was overjoyed and proud of his father. Later, my father got old and couldn't fight anymore. His perception of his father took another 180-degree turn. Why don't you die on the battlefield before you grow old? Die a ridiculous death on a sickbed? You don't look like a great orc warrior at all. You actually want to become that human demigod servant to repay a debt of gratitude after your death? The great orcs never need to repay any kindness to anyone other than the orcs. Hero. Pfft, nearly a year ago, the strong and healthy Garush scoffed at his father, who was old and weak and constantly tortured by his old injuries. Who would have thought that this day would come? At this moment, at this second. In front of this fortress named after the glorious battle song. The person who turned the tide and saved the Warsong clan was not him, Garush, but his father, who he regarded as the shame of the clan and even the entire tribe. Climbing up from the ground, Garush's protruding fangs were still stained with dirt. His face was flushed with shame. Fortunately, as a pure-blooded orc, his reddish-brown skin covered up his embarrassment. He should have called him father. But the inferiority complex of the past, coupled with the arrogant declaration he had made to his old father before his death, made him completely at a loss as to what kind of expression he should use to face this legendary and contradictory father, who had also become a human oracle after death. His mouth squirmed for a long time, but in the end, not a single word came out. Interestingly, as his father, Grom, also did not say a word. Of course, his slightly sighing and sorrowful eyes could also be translated as son. Dad is very disappointed in you. In this regard, Duque, who was in midair as a spectator, felt that it was very funny. If this scene was accompanied by Beethoven's Symphony of Fate, in that sorrowful music, Duque would probably instantly lose his character and laugh out loud. As a transmigrator, of course, Duque knew why the famous Garush was called Brainless Roar. The stupid things he had done in the original history were simply brainless. Duque, who was familiar with history, did indeed have the opportunity to help Brainless Roar change his fate. The problem was, why did Duque have to do this? In the past, Duque had hoped to redeem Arthas and stop him from going astray. But he and Karazhan were blown into the void. No matter how many times he thought about it, Duque still felt that Arthas' fall was the result of a mixture of chance and necessity. The current Brainless Roar, regardless of whether his high IQ of 5 could be saved. First of all, as a human, Duque was not in the position to help an orc or even help the entire tribe become stronger. Teaching a foreign barbarian race to stab themselves to death with a knife was something that Duque would never do. Secondly, the rise of the pure-blooded orcs, represented by Brainless Roar, was already an irreversible trend in the tribe. Sal could not let millions of his compatriots die in Draenor. So, more pure-blooded orcs entered Azeroth than the total number of the tribe at that time. Although it strengthened the tribe's population, it also formed the strongest impact on the tribe's existing ideology. If there was enough food and territory in a peaceful environment, Sal could have brainwashed this group of conservative purebloods to accept new things for another 20 years. Perhaps the tribe could achieve a smooth transition. However, in history, the tribe's territory was twice as large as today's, and they still could not solve this contradiction. In this world, where Duque had premeditated to command the Alliance to seriously squeeze the tribe's living space, how could the tribe make a smooth transition? Sal was now equivalent to being roasted on a fire. As long as the pressure from foreign enemies weakened a little, the contradictions in the tribe were bound to erupt like a volcano. In conclusion, Duque could see it clearly. Whether he killed Brainless Roar in advance or not, there would be new pure-blooded orc heroes who would challenge Sal's leadership and shake the foundation of the tribe's rule. Sooner or later, something would happen to the tribe anyway, so it was better to keep Brainless Roar. At least Duque did not have to be the clown, and he did not have to do this and that behind Grom's back. Chapter 1587. In terms of talent, Braindead Roar was indeed unparalleled. In the realm of warriors, he could even beat Sal. In terms of warriors, only the Ox Chief Cain Bloodhoof could beat him in the entire tribe. However, Duque already had Lord Howl, so why would he still need Braindead Roar? Comparing the way Braindead Roar cut the adult blue dragon and the way Lord Howl cut the ancient blue dragon, the difference was obvious. Braindead Roar would only blindly squander his talent, mindlessly slashing at the enemy's vital points, completely ignoring any changes in the process. After Master Roar regained the body that was at its peak when he was 18 years old, his 50 years of rich combat experience was undoubtedly revealed in the strike just now. Changing the rhythm just right, he seized the fleeting opportunity to strike fiercely after disrupting the opponent. Adjusting the direction of the axe blade with his wrist, he skillfully dodged the adult blue dragon's final counterattack. Without reducing his speed and strength, he avoided the hardest head of the dragon race and cut diagonally into the dragon's neck, causing the greatest damage. It was no exaggeration to say that with an indestructible 18-year-old body and half a century of bloody battle experience, Lord Howl was worthy of the title of a legendary hero. Only such a Grom Hellroar was the peak of the peak, worthy of Duque breaking the boundaries between the Alliance and the tribe and accepting him as a god's messenger. In the sky, Duque clearly saw the hilarious scene of Lord Howl and his son staring at each other without saying a word. The relationship between Orc father and son was quite deep, but the way they got along was often clumsy. Just like how Duroden could sacrifice himself to save Sal. However, most fathers would only teach their children to be great warriors, but not how to be a human. Sal in this life only had Orgrim's personal guidance to achieve his current achievements. Lord Howl and his son, anyway, Duque could not bear to watch. On the eastern horizon of Battlecry Stronghold, a dense cluster of black dots suddenly appeared. In the blink of an eye, the black dots could be seen in color, red, green, bronze, and a small amount of blue. The distant roar of dragons from the sky announced that the previously silent Dragon Sleep Temple was finally making a big move. At a glance, thousands of giant dragons covered the sky. They were galloping from the more eastern Dragonbone Wilderness. With 3 guardian dragons that were as large as small mountains in the lead, they were accompanied by 2 smaller black dragons and blue dragons on both sides, forming the first echelon of attack. Behind them were hundreds of ancient giant dragons, then thousands of adult giant dragons, and tens of thousands of young dragons. This time, the 5-colored giant dragons had come out in full force. On the ground, Garush finally understood why the blue dragons had fled in panic. With their strength, going against Long Sleep Shrine's main force was simply sending themselves to their deaths. Sigh. Lord Howl sighed. He did not know what tone he should use to communicate with his son. He knew that his son hated him. Lord Howl of life. He however, in the face of his son in trouble, in the face of the calamity of the clan that he had sacrificed his entire life for, he simply could not bear it. Roof. Dragon of. Duque did as he wished. The person was saved, but the person who was saved did not even say a word of thanks. Grom's heart must be very complicated. At this time, Grom raised his famous blood howl, and shouted, "The blood of our brethren cannot be shed in vain. Today's grudge will be avenged today. Those who are still breathing, follow me to kill the demonic pivot and slaughter those treacherous blue dragons." Oh, hundreds and thousands of people responded. As long as the beast men could still fight, they simply bandaged their wounds and followed Grom to kill their way to the shore. The battle in the sky was destined to have nothing to do with the Warsong beastmen, but the Draconians and Draconians loyal to Maligos on the ground could be slaughtered to vent their anger. Grom had to do this. A defeated clan would definitely be looked down upon by the other beastmen clans. If he didn't want the clan that had given birth to him, raised him, and made him fight for his whole life to fall, he had to lead these defeated soldiers to pay blood for blood in the shortest time possible. Perhaps for a dead former chief, this was crossing the line. At this time, Grom's first consideration was the legacy of the clan, not the face of the son of the Warsong tribe's chief. When Grom reached out to his son with his right hand, he wanted to pull him up. "Come, slap." Garrush slapped his father's hand away. "I can fight. I can get up myself." With that, Garrush gripped his battle axe and rushed to the front of the group. Warsong beastmen. Follow your chief, forward. The Warsong beastmen all looked at Grom. When they saw Grom nod slightly, everyone followed Garush's steps. This made Garush feel even more ashamed. The shadow of Duque in the sky no longer looked at the Warsong beastmen. The shadow gradually became real. Duque's real body had already descended into the sky above the Northwind tundra. Beside him, several elemental emissaries stood in the air. At this time, Alexstrasza arrived. "Alexstrasza, it's time to put an end to this." "Okay." The Red Dragon Queen's huge head nodded slightly. Nothing saddened her more than her own flesh and blood killing each other. On the other side, Onyxia lowered her head slightly, revealing the back of her neck. As long as Duque nodded, a chair would appear on her dragon's back for Duque to sit on. Duque sent a telepathic message. "Today isn't suitable." Onyxia, who no longer had any integrity, obviously didn't mind being Duque's mount as a dragon aspect. The other dragon aspects did. After all, this was a battle between the dragon aspects. Even Kalegos had stood up for him. If Malygos was proven not to have stepped into the realm of death, the dragon aspects would try to solve the problem through dialogue. If Malygos really did die, then before he became a bone dragon, no, a Dracolic even more terrifying than a dragon of death, the Dragon Slumber Temple would really have to destroy Malygos. Looking at the floating magic island standing on the western horizon, Duque was filled with emotion. He could restrict Malygos from obtaining the two major elements of ice and fire, but he couldn't do anything about the arcana. The arcana didn't come from the four major elements. As for the origin of the arcana, it was impossible to know. Arcana magic was more like the Pantheon's unique source magic. In theory, the arcana energy was an even more primitive energy. Since there wasn't a single arcana world, the mysterious arcana energy could never be cut off. With Malygos' ability, he could even infinitely convert the other elements in the world into arcana energy. Rather than using the magic net as an arena to fight an endless tug-of-war, it would be better to put all his chips on the line and eliminate Malygos in terms of material concepts, ending everything once and for all. Chapter 1588. Oh Malygos. I see that you have a fierce look on your face, and your bones aren't special. You're wearing a green grassland on your head and whatnot. His wife was ridden by Arthas as a mount, and even he had to be ridden by Second Fool. So dragon liches and bone dragons aren't suitable for you. Yes, birds. Ghost dragon, not bad. Green ghost dragon king. High and mighty. Go, go. Duque had already made up his mind to get rid of Malygos in the magic pivot. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun if Malygos and Arthas merged. After all, Malygos was also a king. If the two kings merged and Arthas really became an ice dragon knight, then the power would be too great. One had to know that this wasn't the concept of 1 + 1 = 2, it was equal to 3, equal to 4. Although Second Fool was strong, the lack of super powerful magic skills was a hurdle that he couldn't avoid with the Death Knight template. Once Malygos fell into the trap, the consequences would be unimaginable. Duque had to make the first move to gain the upper hand. For the army of the Sleeping Dragon Temple, the distance of 100 or 200 kilometers would only take a short while to kill. The magic pivot was the Blue Dragon Army's nest in the center of the Kodara Highlands in the northwest of the Northwind Tundra. It was surrounded by countless lightning-like arcane energy, and there were dark black ice buildings everywhere, as well as vertical icicles. Several ancient blue dragons led a small army of blue dragons and hung outside the magic pivot. In front of the incomparably huge sleeping dragon coalition army, these few hundred blue dragons weren't enough at all. Lady Alexstrasza, Lord Nozdormu, Lord Isra, Lord Onyxia, even if you have the status of dragon aspect, bringing a dragon army to the magic pivot is still an offense to the blue dragon army. The leading ancient dragon lowered his head slightly. Oligos. This is none of your business. Get Malygos to come out and see me. Otherwise, even if I have to dismantle the magic pivot, I will see him today. Alexstrasza didn't fall for it at all. She didn't give the ancient blue dragon any chance to play tricks. Duque squinted at the blue dragon and chuckled in his heart. In the original history, this guy lost the competition with Carrie and joined the Twilight Legion. In the end, he was stabbed in the back by Blackmore from another time and space, and his blood was used to activate the nuclear bomb, Focused Rainbow. Right now, Duque just smiled and didn't say anything. Half of the Blue Dragon Legion was frauds, while the other half was weaklings. Anyway, there were too many things to complain about. Duque didn't even know where to start. On the other side, facing the aggressive Red Dragon Queen, the three dragon aspects, and their own traitor, Kalegos, who was leading a group of opponents. Even Oligos couldn't handle it. Alright, I'll go ask His Majesty Malygos. Then, a drama of slipping away was staged. Damn, when it flew away, even its tail was drooping. Originally, Duque didn't think that Malygos would come out. In Duque's imagination, anyone with a bit of brain would choose to escape directly, or even kidnap a large number of blue dragons to escape to the Icecrown Glacier. But he didn't know if it was because Arthas didn't completely control Malygos, or because he simply gave a mental hint and didn't make a move. The entire magic pivot suddenly shook violently. The surrounding clouds were all shaken away by this surging arcane energy. After a burst of dazzling purple-blue arcane energy blossomed like a flower, a huge blue dragon flew out from the magic gate of the magic pivot. Roar! He didn't know if Malygos's high IQ was driving him, or if his soul was still stuck in the past 10,000 years ago, thinking that he was still the lord of all things, the dragon aspect that was regarded as holy by all creatures. Anyway, being stared at by that pair of golden vertical pupils, Duque didn't feel anything. Instead, he seemed to be smiling. Malygos opened his mouth and revealed his fangs. "Ha! My brothers and sisters! Are you also here to witness this despicable person who blasphemed the holy domain of magic, the self-proclaimed demigod of the weave, Duke Marcus, commit suicide in front of me?" Duque was instantly out of character. Please forgive Duque. Even though he was the best actor from the first to the 26th Azeroth Dark Portal, Duque still had the urge to quit acting. Alexstrasza wanted to say something, but Duque interrupted. "Malygos, do you recognize what this is?" With that, Duque raised the thing in his hand high, and then Duque slowly flew towards Malygos under the support of the wind element. Oh! Malygos looked at Duque coldly. He stared coldly at the thing in Duque's hand. Although he knew at first glance that he didn't recognize it, he enjoyed the feeling of looking down at the tiny Duque. After a while, he replied slowly, "I don't recognize it." "What's wrong with it?" Duque wasn't annoyed. "This thing is called a soul casket. It contains the soul of the great Draenei Holy Light Teacher. Perhaps you don't know, but he was the one who fought against the two Burning Legion commanders, Archimonde and Jaden, 25,000 years ago. He was one of the three giants of Eredar." Huh! The indifferent Malygos still didn't know what he was facing. On the contrary, the dragon face that still looked lively had an expression of waiting to watch a show. Seeing this, Duque didn't want to continue acting. Duque shouted, "If you've fallen, then please accept the punishment of the holy light." As soon as he finished speaking, the soul box suddenly emitted a brilliant golden light. The dazzling divine radiance instantly covered the entire magic core area. It was as bright as the rising sun, but the entire sleeping dragon legion and almost all the blue dragons didn't feel anything. Holy light was a typical holy spiritual energy. It didn't do any harm to the righteous formation or even the neutral. Instead, those with good intentions would be encouraged and enjoy additional combat power. 99% of the dragons were fine. Except for one dragon, the great king of magic, Maligos. Wah, despicable humans. You, what did you do to me? The blue dragon king, which was almost half the size of a town, flapped his wings desperately. The arcane energy swirling under his wings was like illusory colorful clouds. When the colorful clouds formed turbulence and dissipated in the air, the sparks of arcane light had already formed arcane missiles of different sizes. When these highly concentrated arcane missiles landed on the ground, the entire open space in front of the magic core region was bombarded by elemental missiles. There were terrifying continuous explosions everywhere. In the sky, the giant dragons that were hovering were all stunned. Many of the giant dragons almost forgot to flap their wings and fell. Every dragon could clearly see that there was a huge decaying wound on Maligos' chest. Chapter 1589. The circular wound was so huge. Putting aside the dark aura around the wound, just the size of the wound alone was enough for a carriage to run through. Even giant dragons were shocked to see it. In the eyes of the blue dragons who followed Maligos, their boss chest had only lost a scale and left a sword mark. In the eyes of the dragons, this injury was no different from a mosquito bite for a human. It was not a big deal. However, in front of Old Man Valen's ultra-pure holy light, all concealment was meaningless. The dark power of Frostmourne had not only pierced through Maligos' chest, but also his heart. The Blue Dragon King had actually died the moment it was stabbed. It was purely the heart that continued to move under the drive of the dark power, maintaining Maligos' life on the surface. Arthas also very cunningly did not let his power seep into Maligos' blood. He only captured the Dragon King's heart and affected Maligos' will. Maligos, who was already seriously deranged, did not even realize that he had been manipulated. He thought that it was a decision made by his own will. If not for Duque's holy light at the beginning, the kind-hearted Alexstrasza might have really been fooled by Maligos. She might have thought that her brother was just having a mental episode again and not betraying the path of guardians. Holy light and the power of shadow were never compatible. Perhaps it was possible to transform holy light and shadow like Duque, but there was no way they could exist in the same place at the same time. Maligos still seemed to be alive on the surface, but in reality, he had already stepped into the realm of death. Under the holy light, it directly melted, revealing the dark heart that was in intense conflict with the power of holy light but still beating. Wow! Even if he is a dragon king, with such an injury, I'm afraid. On the surface, Onyxia was concerned about Maligos. The Black Dragon Princess, who did not have a good nature, was not interested in this emotional world. She was actually indirectly reminding Alexstrasza and the other two dragons that it was time to work. Shock. Sadness. Heartache. She did not want to admit this was the truth, but she had already experienced cruel betrayal once. Maligos' passive betrayal made Alexstrasza feel better. Oh, he was actually forced. He fell for the Lich King's tricks and sorcery. Nozdormu was the first to accept reality. As the space-time Dragon King, he had seen countless futures. In those divergent branches of history, Maligos had died for no reason and looked for his own sh*t so many times that he was too lazy to complain. As the space-time guardian appointed by Titan, he had to maintain absolute silence. Even if my heart is bitter, I can't spoil it. Nozdormu was a little surprised to see Malygos become like this in the main timeline, but he was more relaxed. Killing a brother who was already dead was much less of a psychological burden than beating him to death. Izur aside. My brother, let me help you free yourself from this crazy nightmare. Although Alexstrasza was reluctant, as the leader of the Pentashade dragons, she had the self-awareness of being a role model. She raised her head, and her voice spread across the sky. Malygos, my brother. I feel very sorry for what you have gone through. However, the duties that the Titans have entrusted me with make it so that I have no choice but to announce that the Dragon Slumber Temple has officially relieved you of your duties as the Guardian Dragon. Next, we will purify you as a blasphemer. Accept the divine punishment and rest your soul in peace. Malygos was in a mess in the wind. In fact, he was the one who suffered the biggest blow. What happened to the King of Magic? How did he suddenly go from a high and mighty guardian dragon to a street rat that everyone hated? The determination of his brothers and sisters, the various ancient dragons who were originally doubtful but now had firm eyes, and the blue dragon subordinates who were originally obedient were retreating. He had always felt that the whole world revolved around him, but now he suddenly felt that the whole world was full of hostility towards him. Malygos was already a little crazy, and now he was even more unable to accept reality. Why? 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 This was Malygos's question to himself, and also to his former brothers and sisters. Alexstrasza's eyes were full of sadness. Malygos used to be such a positive and optimistic blue dragon. It was hard to look back now. My little brother. Come to think of it, your glory ended 10,000 years ago. Yes. Since 10,000 years ago, when the arrogant Malygos was severely weakened, he still did not hesitate to cooperate with almost the entire Blue Dragon army to take revenge on Nesario. Everything was destined. Destined madness, confusion, and the end of the road. Either this or that would always lead the mentally ill Malygos to the end of the road. Alexstrasza couldn't help but sigh at this cursed fate. It was not that Ducade did not remind her, but she was always emotional and blinded by family. The Red Dragon Queen roared at the sky. That was the order to attack the entire Sleeping Dragon Coalition army. Kalegos's performance was brilliant. He rushed to the blue dragons who were still loyal to Malygos and shouted, "My fellow blue dragons, our king is long dead. He is already a slave of the Lich King. If you don't want to become a zombie dragon and be buried with him, surrender immediately. Lower your altitude, lie on the ground, and show the emblem of the Sleeping Dragon Temple." This was the blue dragon version of giving up and not killing. Perhaps King Malygos had broken the hearts of his subordinates in the past 10,000 years. If it was not for the fact that he had participated in the killing of Nesario, not many blue dragons would have taken him seriously. Now that the old king was dead and had become a slave of the Lich King, naturally, not many blue dragons would be loyal to him. They were even more cowardly than stray dogs. They quickly dropped to the ground and lowered their noble heads to the Sleeping Dragon Coalition army, which represented the supreme force of the Sleeping Dragon Temple. No. I'm not dead. I'm still alive. My heart is still beating. Why are you all looking at me like that? In the sky, facing the four dragon aspects that surrounded him, Malygos was still arguing with himself in a neurotic manner. At this moment, an evil and vast will suddenly descended. He had the deepest aura of death, the coldest will, and the most evil and cold voice. He was, of course, the mastermind behind this, Lich King Arthas. A huge illusory head appeared behind Malygos. Malygos. From the moment you came to the Ice Throne, you were my possession. Yes, you are already dead. It is I, the great Lich King, who personally granted you eternal death. Arthas, whose face was covered by a blue-black ice helmet, only had his two blue eyes flickering. Chapter 1590. No. Impossible. I only suffered a small injury. Malygos used his claws to dig at his chest in vain, as if he wanted to dig out all the rotten flesh there. However, his claws had only touched the edge of the black heart when his body twitched in pain as if he had been electrocuted. Idiot. Still not accepting reality? Arthas was a little tired of facing such a deranged fellow. On the other hand, if Malygos was not in such a state, he would not have been able to capture a Dragon King so easily, even with the home advantage of the Ice Throne. At first, he seemed to be a little angry, but then Arthas sneered. Forget it, you've already failed. Then I'll take back what belongs to me. In any case, no matter what, victory will only belong to me, the Lich King, Arthas. Following Arthas' declaration, Malygos suddenly let out an earth-shattering scream. No, it should be called Death Wail. That was the resentment towards his inexplicable death, the resentment towards all living beings. This kind of howl on the soul level, even as strong as the guardian dragons, were momentarily stunned and unable to move forward. Malygos' dragon body was changing at a speed visible to the naked eye. On the black heart that was clearly visible in the rotting hole in his chest, the aura of death that had been nurtured for a long time pulsed at high speed to every corner of his body. The beautiful blue scales that had been as blue as the sea on a clear day became snow-white, a paleness that symbolized bones and death. The dragon skin that relied on flesh and blood to support it shriveled, and the originally bulging dragon body instantly became thin. In all of Malygos' joints, white bone spurs broke through the tough dragon skin and grew out. The once gorgeous blue dragon king had turned into a ferocious and terrifying monster of death in just 10 breaths of time. At the same time, his control over magic power did not degenerate with the passing of his life. The entire magic pivot responded to his summons and bloomed with even more dazzling arcane light. Not only that, in the lower part of the magic pivot, a large number of monsters rushed out. Everyone looked and was shocked to find that not only were there dead dragonmen and half-dragonmen, there were even dozens of blue dragons that had long since become corpses. Malygos exclaimed, "By the Titans!" Malygos said he sent them out on a mission. At this moment, there was a commotion at the back of the Dragon Slumber Shrine. A violent snowstorm suddenly appeared in the sky. Needless to say, this was definitely the work of the Lich King. More importantly, taking advantage of this snowstorm, the eyes of the hundreds of blue dragons that should have died long ago on the North Wind Tundra battlefield suddenly blossomed with a fierce blue light. Flapping their battered bodies, they flew into the sky and fiercely attacked the sleeping Dragon Alliance army. Malygos' dragon face turned pale. Heavens! His Majesty, no, Malygos rewarded us with some delicious meat after he returned. Ugh! He was already forcing himself to vomit. Plague was the specialty of the Scourge army. In the past, Thuzad had used the plague to turn the Rotterdam kingdom into corpses. Now, his target had changed from humans to dragons. No one knew if Malygos was conscious or subconsciously manipulated to poison the blue dragon under him. Anyway, it was an indisputable fact that the blue dragons that had died on the battlefield had all turned into corpse dragons. At this moment, Duque suddenly understood why Malygos still slapped the red dragon Crystasa so hard in this life. Malygos didn't know that he had stepped into a land of death, but his survival instinct still drove him to leave descendants for himself. The Red Dragon clan was a clan that represented life. It was probably because of this instinct that he pushed Crystasa forcefully. Sigh. Duque sighed. Looking at the corpse dragon Malygos that had started to go crazy, Duque couldn't help but feel pity for him. A pitiful dragon must have something hateful about him. Everything was a cycle of karma, retribution. The scene became chaotic. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Arthas gave Malygos a death order. "Malygos, my mount, come back." Your mission is complete. Originally, Arthas' idea was to get the benefits first. As long as the corpse dragon Malygos safely returned to Icecrown Fortress, the strength of the Calamity Army would definitely increase greatly. Unfortunately, just as Alexstrasza underestimated Malygos' mental illness, Arthas also underestimated Malygos' ego and arrogance. Perhaps, in Arthas's imagination, Malygos, whose soul had already been captured by him, would listen to his orders and escape during the chaos. In reality, Malygos had gone crazy. Duke Marcus, it's all your fault. Malygos, who had already transformed into a death dragon, didn't take the opportunity to escape. Instead, he charged at Duque. Huh? The dumbfounded Duque felt like he had been implicated. The next second, Duque laughed. Let's just say that he laughed out of extreme anger. Me too, I actually took a lunatic seriously. If I took it seriously, I would have lost. A spiraling golden flame rose from Duque's raised right hand. It was the officially named Song of Light and Darkness, a personal artifact of Duque. The holy golden sword was raised high. Bystanders could only see the golden light shining on the tip of the sword, but as the King of Time, Nozdormu saw something else. Time passed quickly. The scene before him seemed to have happened in a future that he, as the Bronze Dragon King, did not know. After Duque pulled out the sword, what he was about to do was to return the fate of Malygos' death to its original position in a strange trajectory. Nozdormu looked at this scene in shock. Time was still flowing, but it returned all cause and effect, leading the entire world to a brand new future. What kind of power was this? Or was what he saw purely an illusion of a tributary of time? Before Nozdormu or the other two veteran dragon aspects could react, Duque had already activated the special effect of the sword, Demon Slayer. It was not inferior to the golden light released by Valen at all. The holy light made Malygos feel a tingling sensation all over his body. His weakened nerves and lost dragon body would not feel pain. It was pain on the level of the soul. This pain brought him a strange feeling, and he suddenly fell into a trance. At this moment, Malygos heard a cracking sound in the air. He raised his dragon head and found that the arcane energy he was so proud of had actually solidified, forming a strange blue solid substance that looked like dough. It floated in the air. Chapter 1591. Only then did Malygos notice that the solid arcane elements that looked like pieces of plasticine were surrounded by white mist that emitted a cold aura. The arcane elements were divided and wrapped by the frost elements, turning into strange purple-blue ice particles that rustled down from the sky. At some point, a piece of white frost was climbing up Malygos's right paw. Ice instantly formed in the gaps between his fingers that he didn't notice. It wasn't until he accidentally moved his toes that he realized that his legs were creaking. As soon as he opened his toes, there was the sound of ice shattering. The former Blue Dragon King was shocked. This situation made him realize the seriousness of the situation. He finally realized that he was losing control of all the elements. He subconsciously and pessimistically believed that his power had greatly declined. In fact, he was really wrong this time. As the King of Magic, how could his control of the elements decline so easily? However, the magic circuit was a derivative of the soul. A moment ago, Malygos had officially gone from a half-living state to a pure dead person. His soul was undergoing a drastic qualitative change. In fact, although the magnitude of this qualitative change was great, the process was quite short. As long as he calmed down and quickly found a new soul sense, he could regain his combat power as long as he found a way to manipulate magic power in the soul state. Didn't you see how Anastrian, the Sun King, was very good at fighting when he first became a lich? The funny thing was that thinking too much was also a kind of psychopath. Psychopaths couldn't help but let their imagination run wild. Arthas had tried to preserve Maligo's spirit as much as possible in order to make him a death knight like Zul had trained him to be. Now it seemed more like a bad move. Psychopaths were double-edged swords. In Maligo's imagination, since Duque could cut off his sources of frost and fire elements, he should be able to cut off his arcane elements. As a result, when Duque attacked, he foolishly gave up control of the arcane elements. The process was so smooth that even Duque was surprised. He would be a bastard not to take advantage of it. Duque accepted the control of the arcane elements that Maligos gave up without hesitation. The group of blue dragons, no matter which faction they belonged to, all looked at Duque, who was in mid-air, as if they had seen a ghost. Even though the king of magic, whom they once worshipped and obeyed, was still in mid-air, they could not suppress the fear rising from the depths of their hearts. If he didn't know that Duque was a close ally of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, perhaps even Calegos would have hurriedly backed away from Duque. Duque was too terrifying. Even in the face of the oldest king of magic in the world of Azeroth, he could still seize control of all elements in an instant. Without magical elements, the mighty king of magic was nothing more than an undead dragon with a slightly stronger physical body. The purest ice element surrounded Duque's body. Due to the strong winds beneath his feet, the chill that emanated from Duque's body was so intense that even the ordinary dragons that were slightly closer to him could not withstand it and flapped their wings to leave. Onyxia looked at her master in surprise. This was the first time she had seen Duque like this. In her impression, Duque was like a modest gentleman most of the time. Although he was more ruthless than anyone else in crucial moments, he rarely displayed such a threatening aura. Perhaps this was the so-called fight of the same origin. There was only one origin. If you took more, would naturally take less. In the past, they were in the same trench, so Duque could not make a move. The situation now was completely different. Not only did Duque want to be ruthless, but he also wanted to take half of the origin of the next Blue Dragon King. Duque, who was familiar with history, obviously knew what kind of person the next Blue Dragon King, Calegos, was. Apart from his appearance, whether it was before or after inheriting the title of Dragon Aspect, this fellow was a complete trash. If Onyxia could be said to be a low-level version of the Dragon Aspect, then Calegos was used to make up the numbers. Duque did not want to divide the power of the magic net into dragons or mortals. The magic net is mine, and I have the final say. Use it if you want, or scram if you don't. Hence, Duque's sword was not only to kill Maligos, who had submitted to the Lich King. It was also to seize the authority of the Blue Dragon King in Azeroth. Maligos' hoarse voice seemed to come from the depths of the icy hell under the frozen throne. His blue eyes glared at Duque, and he gritted his teeth as he roared, "I knew you were a despicable thief. You stole the elemental authority that belonged to me. Alexstrasza, look at what you've done. You raised a despicable person who stole the power of the Dragon Aspect." The Red Dragon Queen was stunned. Even she was speechless at this crazy dragon who did not even know his own position. "You, Maligos, are already the servant of the Lich King, and you're still calling me a thief, damn thief. Very well, I, Maligos, will let you have a good taste of my anger." Duque could not listen to it anymore. He put his sword behind his back, and when he got into a forward stabbing posture, there was a flash of holy golden light. The next second, Maligos screamed. When he raised his dragon claws, he suddenly realized that something was wrong with his body. His dragon body was strangely dislocated, and his upper body flew out as he pounced. The lower half of his body seemed to be fixed in place by a spell that stopped time, not moving at all. Crack! There was a crisp sound. Miraculously, all the dragons saw a golden spot of light appear on Maligos's waist. The spot of light quickly became a horizontal line parallel to the ground, and it continued to extend to the left and right. At the same time, with Maligos as the starting point, there was a golden line that connected Malygos's back to his lair, the magic pivot behind him. The golden line pierced straight into the huge blue dragon legion's encampment. In the next moment, the golden line swung to the left and right, and then a ripple line appeared in the void. This line swept across Malygos's dragon lair, and with the golden line as the boundary, everything broke in the middle on the spot. There was a soft crack, and at the same time, it split into two halves, from top to bottom. Time seemed to have frozen. The word astonishment was written on every dragon's face. Malygos's dragon face was full of horror. Like a female dragon that had been raped, he screamed, "No!" Because he realized that he had not only lost his body and power, but also the unique rule of Azeroth that was originally under his control. This was what he valued the most. Chapter 1592. To be honest, would Duque be afraid of Malygos? How was that possible? Even if the Blue Dragon King was at full strength, Duque would not be afraid at all. What had always restrained Duque was his good relationship with Alexstrasza and Isera. The Temple of Dragon's slumber had always been the first line of defense against the Burning Legion. If not for this relationship, after Duque became a demigod, he would have taught the crazy Malygos how to be a qualified dragon aspect. Come to think of it, even if Duque went all out under normal circumstances, he still would not be able to kill Malygos in a second. After all, he was a dragon aspect that had been blessed by the divine power of the Titans. The reason why he was able to split Malygos in half in one move was that Malygos had courted death himself. More importantly, the former Blue Dragon King was not used to his current situation at all, from his body, to his mind, to his soul. The disorder in his soul caused him to temporarily lose control of the arcane elements. He had the entire magic core that had stored 25,000 years worth of energy, but he could not use even a little bit of it. The disorder in his body was because he was not aware of it. He did not realize that he had changed from a righteous creature to an evil undead creature. Needless to say, he didn't even realize who was his master now. He did not understand, did not accept Arthesa's kindness to save him, and instead dug his own grave. Everything added together formed this exaggerated scene before them. The dragons all thought that Duke had only caught the last train in God's domain and that he still needed a long time to cultivate. However, Duke had actually killed the king of magic Malygos with a single move. Shock! Shock! Before Alexstrasza had recovered from the car accident in her emotional world, she had to face another shocking reality. Duque might already have the strength to stand on equal footing with her. Perhaps it could be attributed to luck, planning, and execution, but as the Red Dragon who had been watching Duque since the second battle at the Dark Portal until now and watched Duque's growth and rise, no one in the dragon race knew Duque better than her. Even so, she still felt that she had underestimated Duque. Originally, they had predicted that there would be an earth-shattering battle. After all, the other party was a powerhouse and had the advantage of defending their territory. Who would have thought that gathering so many dragons and gathering the other 3 5-colored guardian dragons at the demonic pivot would result in such an unexpected outcome? It was as if all the dragons flying in the sky had become witnesses to the battle between Duque and Malygos over the origin of magic. Arthes, the Lich King, who had been sitting on her ice throne and watching the drama unfold, suddenly stood up in shock. After a long time, she finally managed to squeeze out 3 words, "Damn it." As long as Malygos wasn't so stupid as to turn into a dragon and come under him. Not only could he spy on the higher level of the magical laws of this world, but he could also cause a real rift in the hearts of the dragon aspects. He even fantasized about the day when he could use the cracks in their hearts to make all the dragon aspects fall. This was not impossible. In front of them was Nethario, the Wing of Death, and behind them was Malygos, the King of Magic. Who could guarantee that the other 3 dragon aspects wouldn't fall? But now, because of Malygos's temporary stupidity, all of Arthesa's plans were ruined. Bastard! If I had known, I wouldn't have set up so many schemes. I would have just taken him as a mount. Just as Arthes was throwing a tantrum, Maligos was actually putting on a clumsy performance, acting dumb. Oh! No! Duke Marcus, you despicable mortal, what did you do to me? Do you know that you are guilty of the most heinous crimes? Maligos spat like a resentful woman as he waved his front claws to grab his lower body that was falling from mid-air, in a futile attempt to reattach his lower body. Was this crazy dragon really not here to be funny? If the atmosphere wasn't so serious, Onyxia would probably have laughed out loud on the spot. Duque used holy light to activate the Song of Light and Shadow in his hand and broke Maligos's spine with one strike. It could be said that the key joints of the entire dragon's body were all holy light. Unless Maligos could cross the line between life and death and turn himself back into a living dragon of the Order faction, it would be impossible to reattach his body before the remaining holy light energy was cleared. Originally, whether it was Duque or the 4 dragon aspects, they should have taken advantage of his weakness to take his life. An unexpected situation disrupted all of Alexstrasza's plans. After the dragon aspect's holy blessing was removed from the insane Maligos, all the exclusive laws that the Titans had bestowed upon him should have been taken away. Now, because his soul and body had unexpectedly collapsed prematurely, dazzling light burst forth from his body, and countless shining Titan runes flowed out. Alexstrasza turned pale with fright. Not good. Calegos. Hurry up and gather these runes. If you lose the inheritance of these runes, you will lose the mystery of the Void Protection Matrix. Calegos was stunned. He hesitated for a full 3 seconds before he reacted under Alexstrasza's urging. The structure of the dragon race was very strange. Within any dragon race, there was no such thing as a second brother or a second sister. After the dragon aspect, there were a bunch of ancient dragons. Even among the weaker black dragons and blue dragons in Dragon Ding, there were still 8 to 10 ancient dragons of this level. To be honest, Calegos was not mentally and physically prepared to inherit the name of the dragon aspects. First of all, he was not strong enough. He had all sorts of weak performances, and it was almost impossible for him not to be seen as the shame of the blue dragons. Secondly, he raised the flag against Maligos purely because he felt that it was wrong to gather all the mana in the world for the dragon weave to use. Moreover, he was the most handsome of the dragon race. Not only did a female dragon like Martigosa love him so much that she was willing to go through fire and water for him, there were also many ancient dragons who liked him. Anyway, the group of blue dragons had been unhappy with Maligos' madness for a long time, so they might as well make a big deal out of it. With Alexstrasza backing him up, there was nothing to be afraid of. They had thought that this would be a grand negotiation or something. Who knew that things would take a turn for the worse, and Maligos was actually already a dead dragon. Even his position as a dragon aspect would be forcibly removed. Calegos did indeed have the qualifications to inherit the Blue Dragon King's position, but he was not prepared enough. As soon as he came up, his limbs were in a mess, and he almost instinctively grabbed at the floating Titan runes. Seeing the group of dragon aspects want to die, they were all speechless. When she saw Calegos accidentally shatter a Titan rune, Alexstrasza finally said, "Duque, go and help out." Chapter 1593. Picking up scraps? Was he trying to put a mouse in a rice jar? The serious and sanctimonious hypocrite Dumuk did a good job of concealing his inner joy. No, no. If he were to be serious and show his joy on his face, wouldn't he be laughed at? He. This was a great benefit. If the power of the 4 elements could still be explored by oneself and reverse-engineered methods and magic formulas, then the high-level laws of the arcane were really not something that could be easily obtained. The magic that came out of the dragon race in the past was already a very rare emasculated version. After 25,000 years of development, some had been lost, and some had been changed beyond recognition by later generations. If he wanted to get his hands on the primordial laws, he had to work on Malagoth. Under normal circumstances, the Titan runes that had exploded would definitely not be touched by Duque. Unfortunately, the successor was not strong enough. The pentashade dragon aspect only corresponded to one type of law, and the other dragon aspects could not touch the Titan runes of the magic type at all. But the Dragon Sleep Temple could not just let the Titan runes scatter everywhere. This was an even bigger matter than the betrayal of the dragon aspects. If there was a traitor, they would just have to kill him. Losing the runes was a great crime for the Dragon Sleep Temple. Although the Titans had not returned to Azeroth for more than 20,000 years, a group of Titan Guardians still faithfully performed their duties. Not to mention those far away, just in order next door, there were several guys who were at the same level or even half a level higher than the dragon aspects. Once the blame was placed, even Alexstrasza would not be able to bear it. Duque was a guardian recognized by the soul of Azeroth, after all, so it could barely be considered as a leak. In any case, other than glaring at him, the four dragon aspects could only charge over like a swarm of bees. They would first get rid of Malygos, who was foolishly playing with his corpse puzzle, and leave the easy pickings to Duque. Duque disdained to do lowly things like plucking feathers from geese and robbing people while passing by. Was there a need for Duque to take away some of the Titan runes? Nonsense. If they could just make a copy of the instance dungeon, why did they have to make it so ugly? In the eyes of a bystander, every single Titan rune was made up of thousands of smaller runes that were pieced together in an irregular manner to form a unique magic circuit, which then became a fixed law that was equivalent to the origin of magic in this world. The Titan runes were so complicated that it would take an ordinary mage 8 to 10 years to study a single rune. Was Duque an ordinary mage? Stop joking. With the help of the system elf, Duque had long since started researching and analyzing the Titan runes. With the foundation of observing the four great guardians in Alkavon's treasury, Duque already had a deep understanding of the Titan runes. He also had hundreds of millions of contingency plans in the system. All he had to do now was to compare that part of the runes with Malygos runes and deduce the possible magical laws and reactions. On the other side, two of the four dragon aspects were tearing up, while the other two were expressionlessly dismembering the dead Malygos. It was only a matter of time before Malygos, who only had half of his body left, was dismembered. Even a fool could not save him. On the other side, Duque was happily picking up the runes. On the other side, Kael'Thas had a bitter look on his face. The Titan runes were not something that could be picked up just by touching them. Every Titan rune contained its own unique law. If different types of elements or existences touched it, the rune would trigger a self-destruction system and collapse on its own. On the contrary, touching the corresponding law or element would slow down the reaction and become peaceful. However, this was only temporary. In order to truly return the runes to their original position, there needed to be a qualified carrier to engrave all the Titan runes into a powerful soul of a specific attribute. However, he suddenly realized that not only was his efficiency low, but his soul's ability to carry the Titan runes was also far from enough. As it turned out, Duque's work was even smoother than his. Left with no choice, Kael'Thas shouted, "Your Majesty Alexstrasza! I can't carry all the Titan runes. Can Sir Marcus help me carry some of them?" Red, green, and bronze, the three different skin colors of the dragon aspect's eyes bulged at the same time. It was a spectacular scene. It was fine to let Duque try it out. Your F***King's successor can't even carry the complete inheritance. What are you doing? Alexstrasza, who had never been particularly good-tempered, could only suppress her anger and asked, "What do the other dragon aspects think?" Nozdormu, "It doesn't matter." Onyxia, ditto. Isera, "That's the only way." The red dragon's sister glared at the useless successor Kael'Kas, then turned to Duque and shouted, "Duque, please take care of the Titan runes for a while until Kael'Kas recovers. Then, please transfer them back to Kael'Kas." "No problem. I swear I won't peek at the Titan runes belonging to the blue dragons." Just as Duque finished swearing, there was a sudden clap of thunder in the distant sky. Boom! A white light split the sky in the west. Duque didn't believe it. "As long as Sir Kael'Kas needs it, I will send the runes back at any time." Rumble. Two bolts of lightning appeared in the north and south at the same time. "I, Duke Marcus, swear in the name of the demigod of the Azeroth weave." Rumble, 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 rumble. Lightning and thunder rumbled endlessly. "Damn it! Which fellow Daoist is undergoing tribulation here? Get the hell out of my sight." That was what he said in his heart, but in fact, Duque flew towards the larger Titan runes that had a heavier burden on the soul. Small runes? This young master's system can analyze them in an instant, and I still have to pick them up a second time? The pure Kael'Kas didn't know. How could he know that Duque was this strong? All he could see was Duke shouldering the heavy burden and using his powerful soul to carry the large Titan runes. He was so touched that tears almost came out of his eyes. When he focused on picking up the small runes, his efficiency was greatly increased. One man and one dragon, they used the overflowing elements to maintain the floating Titan runes as much as possible. Then, they temporarily absorbed them one by one and fixed them on their souls. It took more than an hour for them to finish. During this time, the tens of thousands of giant dragons of the Sleeping Dragon Alliance surrounded this area as bodyguards. They couldn't go anywhere. On the other hand, on the ground, Lord Howl led the Warsong tribe's beastmen to kill the dead Draconians and Dragonmen. Maligos? That guy would have been torn apart long ago. Of course, his soul couldn't be captured. From the moment he was stabbed, the core of his soul was left in Frostmourne. Perhaps the next time they met, he could become a dragon soul lich. Chapter 1594. Kalecgos, who had only managed to pick up a small portion of the Titan rune, finally smiled. The human-like smile on his dragon face had charmed the female dragon fans. Unfortunately, his big sister, Alexstrasza, was not happy. "Noob! How could you be so complacent after obtaining such a small result? Could you at least have some ambition?" Although she did not say it out loud, that was what the red dragon sis meant. "Sister, don't be angry. There's nothing we can do about it. Give Kalecgos some time. Maybe he'll be better." Isra used a soft voice to persuade his sister. Sigh. Each generation is worse than the last. When Kalecgos can be half as good as Duque, I'll have nothing to worry about. Look at that little rascal. In Du's eyes, the red dragon sis expression was clearly saying, "You're the worst batch of students I've ever taught." Of course, Duque pretended not to see her piercing gaze. After getting such a great deal, he did not show off and instead angered the dragon. Looking at the system notification, Duque was overjoyed. "You've obtained Anti-Gravity Arcane Energy Thruster Initial Model. You've obtained Arcane Beam Cannon Spell Model." Although these things were from 25,000 years ago, they were still considered black technology in the present day. The most frightening thing about technology and magic was the lack of inheritance. With these Titan technologies, even if they were incomplete, Duque could still make a lot of good things. As for the red dragon sis' resentful gaze, there are so many ants today. Oh, there's even a Voldemort. The gentlemanly Duque opened the magic mirror right under the red dragon sis' nose and looked directly at the ants on the tundra hundreds of meters below him. Humph. The red dragon sis did not have a temper anymore. "Let's go back. Matagosa, Kalegos still needs some time to digest the inheritance of the previous guardian. Take care of the magic pivot for him during this time. Understood, Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Matagosa nodded. A huge internal war among the dragons ended with the destruction of Malygos. Although it seemed a little anticlimactic, it at least prevented the already weak blue dragon army from further weakening. The adult blue dragons, dragon whelps, and dragon whelps had all been used as cannon fodder after Malygos had ordered them to attack the Alliance and Horde forces. This was the best way to preserve the Alliance's strength. In theory, as long as reproduction was encouraged, it would not be a dream for the Dragon Kingdom to prosper in a few hundred or even 1,000 years. Duque, who had obtained the greatest benefit, really wanted to hide and properly digest Malygos' relics. Even now that he had become a demigod, it was a very tiring task to calculate the usage of the Titan runes and the eternal laws within it with the system elves, which were almost equivalent to supercomputers. Blessings never come in pairs, but misfortune never comes alone. This old saying made sense. Just as Arthes was stirring up trouble everywhere and disrupting the rhythm of the northern expedition, something happened to Oder as well. Oder was always mentioned in the same breath as Odin and Odaman. Ulduar was the Titan's third base in Azeroth. It was now controlled by the storm giants and their servants, the crystal golems. That was indeed the case on the surface. After Duque publicly announced that Loken, the guardian of the Church of Wisdom, was a traitor, the Dragon Sleep Temple had long regarded the entire Oder as a snake and a scorpion. Once they were free, they would beat him up. Dealing with Arthes, the blasphemer, was as important as dealing with Yogg-Saron, the enemy of the Titans. As soon as Malygos was dealt with, Oder sent a message. This time, it was Torim, the Titan guardian of the Church of Storm, who contacted the Dragon Sleep Temple to ask for help. Duque narrowed his eyes after hearing the news. If Oder, which had never been disturbed by the outside world, developed as it had in history, Torim, the Storm Guardian, should still be normal at this point in time. However, Torim's development was not going well. Originally, when Torim's wife died in history, he initially thought that it was the doing of the Storm Giant, but then he discovered the real culprit, his former colleague, Loken. Knowing that he would be greatly weakened if he left the Temple of Storm, he still went to the Temple of Wisdom to get even with Loken. Then? Of course, not only did he fail, he was also raped. He was thrown into Oder by Loken to give Yogg-Saron all kinds of hardcore training play. Later, he became Oder's boss, and even his mount was given by Loken to King Vrykul, Imran. It was a classic case of losing everything. Duque had a good impression of this loyal Titan guardian. After all, a man who could risk his life to avenge his wife could be called a real man. In fact, Duque still remembered when he finished a series of Torim's missions in the game and saw Torim being captured. After that, when he attacked Oder and saw Torim's wife, Heve, standing beside him, Duque was touched for a moment. The guardian had already fallen. If he could reunite with his beloved wife, perhaps this would also be a kind of poignant happiness. Unfortunately, Duque was fed a mouthful of poisonous milk powder. That Heve was actually a female demon in disguise. Because even if Torim was contaminated by Yogg-Saron, a part of his will still couldn't be distorted, and he still missed his wife, Heve, in the deepest part of his heart. As a last resort, Loken found a female demon for him to pretend to be his wife and sent her to Torim as a mascot. The guardian fell, at the feet of the players. But every player's heart was heavy. After witnessing the end of a tragic love, they didn't feel that this was a victory worth showing off at all. Fortunately, in this life, after personally participating in the general trend of Azeroth, Duque had the opportunity to change everything with his own hands. After receiving Torim's message, Duque immediately sent out his messenger. The Temple of the Storm was a temple located west of Oder, standing on the peak of a snowy mountain. It was surrounded by lightning all year round, and ordinary creatures didn't even have the right to approach the peak. At this moment, the giant sitting on the huge throne suddenly let out an "oh." The slightly wrinkled eyebrows instantly relaxed, and a smile appeared on his thick lips. In front of the temple, on the huge platform, there was a continuous flash of lightning. The densely packed thunderbolts hung down like curtains, forming an impenetrable vertical net. At this time, several clusters of lightning twisted in the middle, revealing a small hole. In the middle of the hole, an arcane energy that didn't belong to the nature element began to spread. At first, it was just an inconspicuous small dot. In less than a second, it spread into a portal that could allow one person to pass through. A very young human-like existence stepped out of the portal. He strode toward the temple. Chapter 1595. Actually, this human was not walking slowly. Unfortunately, the temple was too huge. After all, the entire temple was built according to the size of a titan. The majesty in the titan's eyes was already so great that it seemed boundless to humans. Just from the high platform outside the temple to the side door of the temple, which could not be called the main door, was 3 times 3, which was the size of 9 football fields. He estimated that from the portal to the front of Turim's throne, it was about 5 kilometers. Guys who played with storms and lightning were never slow. The giant sitting on the throne snapped his fingers, and a blanket made of lightning appeared at the feet of the little human. The lightning did not hurt the human at all. Instead, it was like a mount, carrying the human at high speed to Turim's throne. The lightning circled behind the giant, as docile as a tabby cat. Other than the occasional crackling sound of electricity, there was no excess energy or damage. The giant spoke. I, Turim, the guardian of storms, specially sent a message to the dragon's slumber temple. Why is it an empty shell with no content? The young human smiled and bowed. You can call me Mark Dooku, the man who destroyed Sargera's largest fortress in the Twisted Nether. Of course, you can also call me by my name in this world, Duke Marcus, the guardian of Azeroth. After saying that, Duke looked at the Titan Guardian through Mark Dooku's eyes, who was no stranger to him. Like most guardians, Turim had an extremely large body. In terms of height, he was about the same as Alcavan and the other giants, around 10 stories tall. His body was more balanced than Alcavan's, more like a human. His slightly brown earthy skin made people think of the earth at first glance. He had a typical square face, with pinkish white hair that reached his chin, which was a little strange. Coupled with his extremely burly body and the huge warhammer that was constantly emitting lightning, the entire aura of a guardian came out. His pauldrons, belt, gauntlets, and leg guards all had blue edges and white background circular decorations, which looked like incandescent lamps. Although it looked a little ridiculous, anyone with the slightest perceptive ability would be able to sense the earth-shattering power of thunder contained within. As for his brown and black lace ribbons, they were negligible. Duke's words made Turim's expression turn serious. As a Titan Guardian, he did not care about anything that happened in the outside world. He only cared about his duties and everything related to the Titans. When the Titan left Azeroth, Sargeras had already betrayed the Pantheon. Turim knew this. Duke, who could make the traitor of the Pantheon Temple suffer a setback, naturally made him look up to him. After a moment of silence, Turim said, "All right, Duke Marcus, I admit that you have the right to speak to me as an equal. Before we start talking, let me ask a question. I remember that the place where I requested for help was the Dragon's Resting Temple. Why are you here? Respected Lord Protector, the place you are guarding is only Orger. The place that the 5-colored guardian dragon is guarding is the entire Azeroth. Just today, at the Icecrown Glacier to the west of Orger, Arthas, the self-proclaimed Lich King, murdered the magic guardian dragon Maligos and almost turned it into a fallen Dracolic. The Dragon's Resting Temple's combat power is very tight, so they asked me, who is better at dealing with such things, to help. After saying that, Mark Dooku threw out a scroll. Tarim raised his hand, and a cluster of lightning flew out. The scroll opened. Suddenly, a green brilliance lit up, and an illusory letter appeared in mid-air. The paper was full of Titan words written with faint divine power. This was Alexstrasza's handwritten letter. Every guardian had its own unique mark and way of writing, and it could not be deceived at all. After reading the letter, Tarim completely trusted Duque. Alexstrasza, Isra, and Nozdormu jointly recommended you as the full agent of the Dragon's Resting Temple to help solve Orger's crisis. After reading the letter, I have to admit that you are very powerful. You have completely surpassed the limits of mortals. Even I am envious of your achievements. Unfortunately, my mission binds me. Otherwise, I would be willing to fight against the evil people who betrayed the Titans with you. Thank you for your trust. Duque bowed again. If the Temple of Storm has any trouble, please tell me directly. Tarim let out a long sigh and told Loken's story. This was the same as what Duque had previously revealed to the Dragon's Resting Temple. Therefore, Duque asked Mark to pretend to be listening humbly, but in fact, he was dealing with official documents. Until he got to the point. Tarim said with determination, Loken killed my wife and turned my supporters against me. He took everything from me, but everything is about to change. Regardless of whether I have the Dragon Slumber Shrine or your help, I will personally go to the Wisdom Shrine and settle the score with Loken. Duque smiled. Please do not doubt my sincerity. The existence that scourges Azeroth is my enemy. Since I have killed Thun, I don't mind killing another Yogg-Saron. After saying that, Duque took out a ring. Ring of the Fallen Deity. The attributes of this ring had long fallen behind the times. To be honest, Duque did not care about it. The key to the ring was that it was made from one of Thun's eyeballs. This was the best proof of that. Tarim suddenly stood up, and his huge body was like a small mountain rising from the ground. That's right. It's this similar smell. Even if this ring has been washed with holy light, I can still smell the stench of the god of decay. After seeing that Tarim's emotions had been completely stirred up, Duque revealed a mysterious smile. Admit it. Tarim, your power will be greatly weakened if you leave the Temple of Storm. You can't beat Loken in the Wisdom Temple. But if you follow my method, I can guarantee that you will avenge your wife. As soon as Duque said that, Tarim's blue eyes, which were already emitting a faint divine glow, lit up even more. Okay. Tell me, I'll do it. I still need you to suffer a crushing defeat at Loken's hands, but before that, I'll have to trouble you to go somewhere secretly. His wife's death had been stimulating Tarim's nerves all the time. Without much hesitation, Tarim nodded heavily. Okay. That night, the wind howled and thunder and lightning flashed. Outside the Wisdom Temple in the north of the Temple of Storm, Tarim raised the Hammer of Thunder and roared loudly on his beloved mount, the ancestor dragon Varanus. Loken, I'm here, for Sif. For justice. For the watchmen who have been corrupted by you. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.